Chapter 1220. Su Ming sat on a mountain on the rapidly moving planet that resembled a shooting star. He lifted his head and stared at the sky. There were no clouds in the sky, only a layer of chaos that looked like flowing water. It was like fog, and as it moved swiftly, starlight would occasionally appear, but usually it would disappear in an instant. It was just like the Yu Xian Su Ming had seen in Morning Dao sect. Su Ming's face was slightly pale. He covered his chest with his right hand. Stabbing pain traveled through his body, causing grief to appear in his eyes. Once he left Morning Dao sect, he had asked himself what else he had. Everything in Dark Mountain was fake. His elder was Su Xianyi's disciple, and his master, Tian Xiezi, had clearly become Su Xianyi's chess piece in the end. His fate was the same as that of the first god of berserkers. His three senior brothers could not be found in the vast sea of people. Bai Ling was his first love, but when he looked at it at that moment, it was also fake. Everything about it was not real, and it made Su Ming remember the desire to walk out of the world beyond the sky and see the world outside when he was still in the land of berserkers. Di Tian was using him, and Su Xian was treating him as a chess piece. His mother was immersed in the fifth kiln, and Su Ming turned his head around to look at his life. There were always hands that were wantonly manipulating him and affecting his fate time and time again. It would have been fine if someone else had done this, but the source of all this was not an outsider, but his own father. Su Xian was not wrong. From his perspective, he was not wrong. He was a person who had gone mad for the sake of his race rising to power. What could he possibly do wrong? Su Ming might not agree with the theory that there was no home without a race, but it was just as he said. He did not hate, only resentment. A person who could sacrifice everything for the sake of a race rising to power was not someone Su Ming could hate. In fact, he could understand it, but he could not accept that he had always been a chess piece since he was young. In fact, his friends had also become Su Xianyi's chess pieces due to their familiarity with each other. This was something he could not accept. He could not accept it. Like Yu Xian, Su Ming wanted to go to the Emperor of Abyss True World and search for Yu Xian, but what right did he have to do so? With his passion and willingness to throw caution to the wind, Su Ming's level of cultivation made it impossible for him to go to the Emperor of Abyss True World and save Yu Xian. Su Ming understood this. If he wanted to go to the Emperor of Abyss True World, then the first thing he needed to do was to fuse with his real physical body so that his level of cultivation could become stronger. Only by doing so could he succeed in one go. Because Su Ming knew that he only had one chance. Only one chance. Su Ming, he mumbled bitterly. Su Ming, Su. Su Ming mumbled in anguish. He did not want this to happen. He could not accept this. He had always wanted to control his own fate, but time and time again he had thought that he was in control of his own fate, but in the end he found that he was still in someone else's hands. Actually, I just want to understand that I won't take advantage of my friends. I'll be willing to do anything for you, for my father, for your ideals. I'll give up everything. Is this so difficult? Su Ming asked softly while looking at the flowing sky. I just want a home. Su Ming lowered his head and closed his eyes, cutting off the tears that fell down his cheeks. Is it really so difficult? Wind blew past Su Ming's body. After a long, long time, he opened his eyes. There was no life in them, and his heart was dim. A deep sense of loneliness rose from his body. That loneliness sank into his soul and fused with his life, refusing to disappear even after a long time had passed. That loneliness came from a person, but it had nothing to do with love. He was a wanderer without a home. On the mountain in the planet, in the army of 5 million cultivators from the war chamber's earthen pole, he mumbled about the home he desired the most in his life. My family. I can overturn the galaxy for them. I can give up everything for them. I only want a home. Su Ming sighed softly. There was loneliness and desolation in his sigh. When he opened his eyes, he stared at the sky and shook his head. Su Ming knew that what he desired was the simplest thing to many people, but to him, it was incredibly difficult. In silence, Su Ming patted his storage bag with his right hand. Immediately, a blade of grass appeared on his palm. He had obtained it in the fifth kiln, and it was a strange item that could allow a person to sense the laws of fate. Control the fate of the world around me. Control my own fate. Fate. Su Ming mumbled. As he stared at the blade of grass, he closed his eyes again. He could only hide his loneliness and bury his dejection and desolation. He had to be strong, because everything in the future was just like fate. He could only continue becoming stronger so that he could truly become the master of everything. With the power to control the universe, he could create his own home. At that moment, a determination that would never waver in his life appeared in Su Ming's body. I will have a home where I will have my parents, my elder, my friends, my master, my lover, and all the people I am familiar with. Even if the universe is destroyed, even if arid triad expanse cosmos is destroyed, even if Saint Defire and Dark Dawn are at war, even if the disasters in the galaxy occur, even if disasters come one after another, even if countless cycles of reincarnation occur, I will still create a home that belongs to me. This is my Tao, my life, and my home. I am the one who created it. Even if it is in the abyssal world, I am the one who created it with my own hands. The blade of grass in Su Ming's hand shuddered at that moment, and the determination that had affected his entire life rose in his heart. It gradually turned into wisps of green light that fused into Su Ming's hand and gradually disappeared. Su Ming opened his eyes at that moment. Determination appeared in them, and a presence that was like that of spring instantly appeared. At the instant the presence that was like that of spring appeared in Su Ming's eyes, his soul that belonged to the Abyss Builders let out a shocking roar in his body. Su Ming's soul immediately started boiling. All the blood in his body turned into complicated runic symbols at that moment. When the blood formed by the runic symbols flowed through Su Ming's entire body, his soul also gathered together a large number of runic symbols. In fact, there were also illusory runic symbols echoing around him at that moment. They surrounded him, and in the blink of an eye, they turned into a windstorm. When booming sounds reverberated in the air, the bald crane immediately widened its eyes beside Su Ming and retreated swiftly. The presence of the abyss, the essence power of arid triad expanse cosmos, the secret of the 9 stars, the reason why Saint Defire and Dark Dawn are fighting over it. Between light and darkness, with a single thought, light, and with a single thought, the power of darkness. The bald crane shuddered. Chaos appeared in its eyes. Something seemed to have appeared in its disappearing memories at that instant, causing pain to suddenly appear on its face as it mumbled unconsciously. It grabbed its bald head and let out a loud shout before quickly retreating. At that moment, a long arc shone in the sky. Zhu Yukai and Flame Fiend's progenitor arrived and immediately guarded the area. In shock, they stared at Su Ming, who was surrounded by the windstorm of runic symbols. They could clearly sense a power and presence that they could not describe in the windstorm. That presence was incredibly strange. It was clearly not strong, but even Zhu Yukai felt as if his soul and even his flesh and blood were trembling. It was even more so for Flame Fiend's progenitor. He stared at the windstorm of runic symbols around Su Ming with a dumbfounded expression. The shock in his heart reached its peak because he noticed that there was one among the countless runic symbols in the windstorm that gave him the feeling that it belonged to the origin of life of Flame Fiends. It was as if that runic symbol represented the entire Flame Fiends race. And this runic symbol was incredibly insignificant in the windstorm, like a drop in the ocean. What is this? At that moment, Flame Fiend's progenitor and Zhu Yukai were not the only ones who reacted this way. The 3 armored cultivators beside the man, known as Wild Dog, shuddered simultaneously on the planet. In shock, they stared in the direction of the mountain where Su Ming was. Their breathing quickened. They were very far away, but it was precisely because they were so far away that they could clearly sense a power that seemed to belong to their souls. Perhaps it did not belong to the 3 of them, but to their race. The expression of the middle-aged man who was drinking by himself also changed at that moment. He looked swiftly in Su Ming's direction, and his right hand trembled slightly. A huge storm raged in his heart. He was a member of a race that had already disappeared from the universe, and he was the only member of his race left. Yet, at that moment, he sensed his race's soul in Su Ming's direction. What's going on? As the middle-aged man's breathing quickened, the 5 million cultivators from the earthen pole's war chamber in the galaxy came to a halt. All of them turned their heads around to look at the seven-colored planet. At that moment, the 5 million cultivators from different races sensed the presence of their race on the seven-colored planet. They sensed their race's soul. In Tao Ocean, under morning Tao sect, was a storm. As the sea of fog roared, a huge face was formed on the surface of the sea. That face belonged to the predecessor of Tao Ocean, and a powerful light shone in his eyes. Yet another person has opened the nether gate. I wonder what kind of will his nether gate contains, and to what extent will it grow? Will it be like all the people who have opened the nether gate in my memories and eventually be assimilated, or will he be able to truly open that door, leading to a single thought? At the same time, in morning Tao sect, Su Xianyi's isolation ground shuddered. His eyes flew open, and when he stared into the distance, his gaze seemed to be able to pierce through space and see everything he wanted to see. One of the three great inborn abilities of my race, opening the abyss gate, Su Xian, he mumbled. After some time, he sensed the presence of Su Ming's abyss gate, and anguish gradually appeared on his face. The will to protect, the thought of creating a family. Ming-Er, one of these days, I will make it up to you. I will. If you like this work, please come to Qidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1221. The three great innate abilities of the Abyss Builders were the ability to control the flow of time, the ability to possess all manner of living, and the ability to open the Abyss Gate. These three great innate abilities created the might and glory of the Abyss Builders. However, not all Abyss Builders possess these three great innate abilities. Among them, the ability to control the flow of time was the easiest. Practically 1 in 1,000 Abyss Builders would come to understand this innate divine ability. As for seizing the bodies of all living things, it was clearly much more difficult than controlling the reversal of time. Roughly 1 in 1,000 clansmen would possess this ability. However, these 1,000 people were not ordinary clansmen. Instead, they were people who had mastered the power to reverse time. There might not seem to be many Abyss Builders who could obtain these two innate abilities, but in truth, with the number of Abyss Builders, there were quite a number of such people. The thing that affected the awakening of this innate ability was the bloodline. The purer the bloodline, the more Abyss Builders would be able to awaken their innate abilities. As for the third innate ability, the ability to open the Abyss Gate, it was comparatively easier. The probability of it awakening was 1 in 10, but these 10 people were the Abyss Builders who had understood the power to possess and control the flow of time. When Su Ming was in the land of Berserkers, he had used the sign of the awakening of the Abyss Gate and obtained the power to control the flow of time. He had fused the past and future to form destiny, causing his innate ability to be gradually perfected. When he left the land of Berserkers and was devoured by the Crimson Python Phoenix, during the moment of danger, his innate ability to possess was stimulated and awakened. It was as if some sort of instinct had been activated, causing him to instantly obtain the second great innate ability of the Abyss Builders. Many years had passed since then. At the instant Su Ming buried all the complicated emotions and sorrow in his heart in the dead planet. He used the grass containing the laws of fate to activate the third great innate ability of the Abyss Builders. The Abyss Builders' divine ability allowed them to reverse time to its peak. They could control the flow of time and become the masters of time. If they could also reach the peak of their second innate ability, they would be able to fuse all of their clones into their real bodies and reach the peak of their power. The third great divine ability, the ability to open the Abyss Gate, was the most mysterious ability of the Abyss Builders. It was also the strongest innate ability of the Abyss Builders that practically no one could practice to its peak. It was the power of resurrection. It was the power to create a world on its own, to open the abyss world, and to resurrect all those who had died. However, creating the abyssal world was too difficult. Since ancient times, even the powerful progenitor of the abyss builders had not been able to do it completely. Opening the abyss gate was just the first level of this divine ability. There would be more after that. Just the activation of the abyss gate alone was already the same as opening a door to a higher level for Su Ming. The vortex surrounded Su Ming. It contained countless runic symbols, and each of them represented the souls of a race in arid triad expanse cosmos. Su Ming had his eyes closed in the vortex. His hair danced in the wind. His body might not have been big or built, but he was definitely not thin and shriveled. Yet at that moment, his body started rapidly withering away, as if all his flesh and blood were being sucked away by some invisible existence within him. At the same time, the Abyss Builder's legacies hidden in his soul immediately appeared in Su Ming's mind, allowing him to instantly understand his current condition. It was a thirst for flesh and blood, for souls, and for life. It was the same condition all Abyss Builders experienced once they opened the Abyss Gate. They needed a large amount of flesh, blood, and essence of souls to fully open the Abyss Gate. Right then, it had only been opened, not completely opened. Su Ming could clearly sense that there seemed to be a bottomless pit in his body, and there seemed to be a door in the depths of it. Waves of aura of abyss spread out from the door, and he also understood that if he opened it, his level of cultivation would increase exponentially. At the instant these thoughts and the epiphany of the legacies in his blood appeared in Su Ming's mind, the vortex around him disappeared. Everything around him returned to normal, and not a single hint of aura spread out. However, Su Ming's body had become completely thin and withered while he sat on the mountain. It could be said that he had changed drastically compared to his previous appearance. His thinness was still continuing, as if it wanted to devour all of Su Ming's flesh and blood. In fact, as the bottomless pit in his body absorbed his soul, he gradually showed signs of wavering. Su Ming's eyes flew open, and a dark light shone in them. At the instant Flame Fiend's progenitor saw Su Ming's eyes, he shuddered. White smoke spread out from his eyes, ears, nose, and mouth, as if it wanted to stretch towards Su Ming against his will. This scene shocked Flame Fiend's progenitor. He retreated swiftly, but he still could not stop his life force and soul from spreading out. After all, just one glance from Su Ming could already do this, so there was no way Flame Fiend's progenitor would not be shocked. Fortunately, Su Ming immediately averted his gaze, which allowed Flame Fiend's progenitor to quickly circulate his cultivation base and force the life force and soul that had spread out to fuse back into his body. His face instantly turned pale, and he looked at Su Ming with fear. Zhu Kai sucked in a deep breath as well. As the bald crane shuddered, a dazed look appeared in its eyes, as if there were countless chaotic memories continuously crashing into each other in its mind. The presence of the abyss, the death of all lives, the power of light and darkness with a single thought, is not allowed to appear. The bald crane's eyes rolled back, and it fell to the ground with a thump. Once it quickly got up, it clawed at its head again and let out a long breath. Darn it all, this is asking for a beating. Come abyss dragon, my boy, hit me. The bald crane twisted its body, and a black dot immediately flew out from its body. It instantly turned into an abyss dragon, and just as it was about to attack the bald crane quickly went up and kicked the abyss dragon fiercely. Su Ming was not too far away. At that moment, his eyes might have been open, but there were a large amount of blood capillaries covering them. His body had withered away for a moment, and at that moment he was practically skin and bones. However, even in this state, Su Ming did not show any signs of weakness. Instead, a vast power of cultivation base was continuously brewing in his body. I need a sufficient amount of flesh, blood, and souls to activate the Abyss Gate. Only then can it stop absorbing my life force. Su Ming's eyes sparkled. His heart was filled with anticipation at that moment. He looked forward to what sort of changes the Abyss Gate, one of the three great inborn abilities of the Abyss Builders, would bring about. When time reversed, Su Ming sensed just how powerful it was. The ability to possess all lives also gave Su Ming an incredibly strong ability to survive. The strength of these two divine abilities was enough to make anyone go mad. Right then, Su Ming had activated his third inborn ability. The things that he had come to understand from the legacy of the soul were already enough to make his heart tremble. At that moment, a glint appeared in his eyes, and he looked towards the sky filled with flowing fog. He had never looked forward to the war coming sooner than he did at that moment. Su Ming sucked in a deep breath and closed his eyes to quell the excitement in his heart. He also continued suppressing the bottomless pit that had formed in his body. As he did so, the murmurs of his will echoed in his heart. For the Tao that belongs to me, for the sake of creating a home, I, Su Ming, even if I have to overturn the universe, even if I have to destroy all lives, I will still complete it. Su Ming's breathing quickened. His closed eyes were filled with determination, but there was also a crazed light in them. Gray, red, gold, and black light continued changing on his body, causing Su Ming's thoughts to gradually feel as if some sort of will in his heart had been ignited. In the end, it turned into a brilliant light that was hidden from his eyes. That brilliant light might have been hidden, but his heart went through a metamorphosis due to the determination he felt at that moment. Time trickled by, and a month went by. During it, Su Ming continued sitting on the mountain. His body had withered so much that it looked like he had turned into a skeleton. It was as if a gust of wind could blow him away, but the presence spreading out from Su Ming's body had become increasingly terrifying. By his side were the bald crane, Flame Fiend's progenitor, and Zhu Kai. All of them would occasionally cast their gazes towards Su Ming. The past month had not been easy for them. Even Zhu Kai felt as if all his life force, soul, and even his flesh and blood were about to be sucked out of his body if he was a little closer to Su Ming. During that month, the middle-aged man called Wild Dog had come once, but once he got closer to Su Ming, his expression changed drastically. Without any hesitation, he left swiftly and never returned. On this day, a loud bang came from the galaxy. Sounds of battle reverberated in space, and a storm of war descended. This was the first great battle the Earth and Pole had to face. Beyond the planet was a gray screen of light flashing rapidly in front of the 5 million cultivators from the Earth and Pole's war chamber. Behind it were nearly 1 million cultivators from the Immortals Union. All of them had pale faces as they stared at the army of the war chamber beyond the screen of light in shock. Behind them were 9 planets in the shape of spoons. This place was a relocation spot belonging to the Immortals Union. It was also the territory of the Dust Dews. As one of the members of the Immortals Union, the tribe leader, great sect elder, and the other powerful warriors had solemn and anxious expressions on their faces. They were in the galaxy above the 9 planets, and their gazes pierced through the screen of light to stare at the 5 million cultivators from the war chamber with monstrous, murderous aura. Wherever the war chamber goes. At that moment, a soft voice came from the planet where Su Ming was located behind the cultivators from the war chamber. Almost at the instant it spoke, low roars tumbled out from the mouths of the 5 million cultivators. All signs of life are gone. At the instant the 5 million cultivators roared, they rushed out together. With a single step, they spread out their cultivation bases and charged towards the screen of light. It was also at that moment that Su Ming's skeleton-like body on the planet lifted his head. He opened his eyes, revealing a gaze that was filled with red, but he still retained his intelligence. It was a gaze that longed for flesh, blood, and soul. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1222. Boom. A powerful wave of impact swiftly spread out from the gray screen of light. As it swept through the area, It charged towards the 5 million cultivators from the war chamber like a raging wave, and it even affected the planet where Su Ming was. At the same time, as the ripples spread out, the gray screen of light also began to twist violently, as if a violent force was trying to tear it apart. It continued to struggle under that force. The faces of the near 1 million cultivators from the Immortals Union behind the screen of light were pale, but when they saw that the screen of light soon returned to normal and no longer distorted, excitement immediately appeared on their faces. Let us invite the battle of the 9 planets. An awe-inspiring voice came swiftly from the 9 planets behind the 1 million cultivators. It came from the current tribe leader of the Dust Dews. As his words echoed in the air, the 9 stars shone at the same time. 9 pillars of light charged forward and shot through the screen of light. When they descended on the battlefield, they turned into 9 figures of light that were about 100 feet tall. The 9 figures of light roared at the same time, and 9 waves of power equivalent to those in Mastery Realm instantly erupted from them. They surrounded the 9 figures of light and charged towards the 5 million warhalls. At that moment, a cold harumph came from a warship behind the 5 million cultivators from the war chamber. There was no need for Wild Dog to command a battle of this scale. There were naturally cultivators under him who would take up the task. Battle of the 3rd, 6th, and 7th cultivators of Earth and Pole cut the sky. At the instant those words were spoken, about 1,500,000 cultivators among the 5 million cultivators took a step forward simultaneously. Their actions were the same, their presences were similar, and the circulation of their cultivation bases in their bodies was the exact same. The same divine abilities instantly appeared on their bodies. A huge sword gathered above each person's head at that instant. It shone with a glazed light, and when it reached a piercing degree, it covered the galaxy. As the 1,500,000 cultivators roared, the 150 glazed swords charged into the air. Once they swiftly fused together in the galaxy, they formed a huge sword of light that was 100,000 feet long. The sword of light let out a hum, and as if there was an invisible giant holding it, it cut down on the gray screen of light. In the midst of the shock of the cultivators from the Immortals Union behind the screen of light, a deafening bang shook the sky and earth. As it spread out violently, the sword of light crashed into the gray screen of light. With a loud bang, the screen of light instantly shattered, completely cut apart by the sword of light. Wherever the Hall of War passes, the voice that had called for him to slash the heavens echoed once again, and the response he got was another roar from the 5 million cultivators. There's no sign of life. Boom! The 5 million cultivators turned into 5 million long arcs that charged towards the 1 million cultivators from the Immortals Union who were revealed after the screen of light shattered. This was not a battle where both sides were evenly matched. Regardless of whether it was their numbers or their individual levels of cultivation, they were completely uncoordinated. The cultivators from the Immortals Union were like scattered sand, and they could not hope to compare to the most elite cultivators from Morning Dao Sect's war chamber. As for the 9 figures of light with the power of those in Mastery Realm spreading out from them, just as they were about to attack, 9 old men flew out from the warships in the sky. As they laughed, they spread out their cultivation bases, revealing that they were all in Mastery Realm. There was bloodthirst on their faces, and as murderous aura surged into the sky, they charged forward. This was a battle where Morning Dao Sect would fight at full strength. In it, Morning Dao Sect had mobilized all their powerful warriors, intending to end the battle as quickly as possible against the Immortals Union. They wanted to destroy the entire Immortals Union in one go. They were like a huge, sleeping beast that had woken up at that moment and bared its fangs at the wolves around it. It let out a shocking roar. The 5 million cultivators from the war chamber rushed into the broken screen of light like wolves charging into a flock of sheep. As booming sounds reverberated in the air, shrill screams of pain instantly rang out. With every single step the army of 5 million cultivators took, blood would spill into the air and souls would shatter. It was also at that moment that a long arc rushed out from the planet belonging to the war chamber. There was a black hue of stillness in that long arc, and within it was a thin and withered body that looked like a skeleton. Naturally, it was Su Ming. Su Ming's eyes were bloodshot. The bottomless pit of the abyss gate in his body was continuously devouring everything about him. If Su Ming had not suppressed it with everything he had during the month, his body and soul would have been destroyed a long time ago. After all, the abyss builders in the fifth true world would prepare for a long time before they chose to open the abyss gate under the protection of their people. Once they succeeded, they would immediately replenish a large amount of flesh and blood to stabilize the abyss gate. However, Su Ming's opening of the abyss gate was a result of all sorts of fortuitous events, which was why he had not made sufficient preparations. However, the battle between Morning Dao sect and the Immortals Union gave Su Ming a serendipity of flesh and blood that not even his people could obtain in the fifth true world. When Su Ming rushed out, a monstrous, murderous aura spread out from his body with a bang. He was so fast that he instantly shot through the warships and the cultivators from the war chamber. Wherever he went, it did not matter whether it was the cultivators on the warships or the cultivators from the war chamber. All of their hearts trembled at the instant they saw him. They had a strong feeling as if their souls, life force, and even their flesh and blood were about to be sucked away. That feeling only appeared for an instant before gradually disappearing as Su Ming left into the distance. However, the shock that remained in their hearts did not disappear. Su Ming charged forward, and in just the span of a few breaths, he rushed through the shattered screen of light and into the army of the Immortals Union. The moment he did so, a large number of cultivators around him immediately executed their divine abilities and charged towards him with bloodshot eyes. But the moment they closed in, their expressions changed drastically. No matter how crazed they were, they shuddered at that instant. The feeling as if their souls, flesh, and life force were about to be sucked away caused indescribable terror to rise in their hearts. Su Ming lowered his head, lifted his arms, and pushed them to his sides. A shocking boom instantly reverberated in the air, and a gigantic vortex appeared around Su Ming. That vortex spun with loud bangs and covered a circular area of 1,000 feet. Once it spun one round, shrill screams of pain immediately rang out around Su Ming. The bodies of nearly 100 cultivators within 1,000 feet instantly withered. A large amount of their life force turned into white smoke that was forcefully extracted from their eyes, ears, nose, and mouth. When it fused into Su Ming's body, the flesh and blood of the cultivators also shriveled up, and they instantly turned into skeletons. Terror and despair appeared in their eyes, and their souls were continuously sucked out of their eyes, ears, nose, and mouth. In the blink of an eye, they fused into Su Ming's body, causing him to be surrounded by a large amount of white smoke. When all of it disappeared, Su Ming stood in the area, and the near 100 cultivators around him fell down and turned into ashes. Su Ming's body was still thin, but there was a hint of red in it. Evil art. This is evil art. Terrified screams came from a distance. The area around Su Ming was empty, causing him to instantly be noticed by everyone, especially the cultivators from the war chamber. Shock appeared on their faces. If it was not because Su Ming's robe was the sacred constellation robe, and if it was not because they could still vaguely tell that he was Dao Kong despite being only skin and bones, even the cultivators from the war chamber would have immediately attacked. Su Ming's appearance and killing 100 people in the Immortals Union was insignificant, but his methods had shaken the hearts of all those who saw it. However, there was no time for people to think too much in the battlefield. After a short pause, the battle resumed. Su Ming moved, and wherever he went, all the people would scream shrilly before their bodies and souls were destroyed. They were all absorbed by Su Ming, and the red in his eyes gradually reduced. His body slowly recovered, and the abyss gate in his body shone with waves of dark light. A large amount of aura of abyss filled Su Ming's body, causing his cultivation base to erupt with a great amount of power, as if there was no end to it. Kill. Su Ming was so quick that he did not even use any other divine abilities as he charged forward. He only used the power of the Abyss Gate in his body to absorb them. To him, the activation of the Abyss Gate required flesh, blood, and souls. If he did not absorb them, he would be sucked dry and turn into a mummy. Besides, Su Ming did not have a single shred of affection towards the Immortals' Union or even Morning Dao sect. Even if all of them died, he would not feel a single shred of pity for them. He only cared about his friends. Even if the sky and earth fell and all lives died, as long as his family and friends were still around, they would have nothing to do with him. With the flesh and blood of all lives and the life force of the universe, he would create a home for himself. That home would have all the people around him, and then Su Ming would do it without any hesitation. Even if he was called bloodthirsty and hated to the core, he did not care. Boom! The bodies and souls of the 1,000 people around Su Ming were destroyed. All their life force and souls were swiftly absorbed by Su Ming, and he turned around swiftly. When he lifted his right hand, he pointed at the center of a cultivator's brow who had approached him without a sound. With one finger, he pierced through his skull and sank deep into his body. Then, right before the Almighty from the Immortals' Union and Mastery Realm stared at him in disbelief that he had been killed with just one strike, Su Ming sucked away all his life force and soul. Kill him. He's a direct descendant of Morning Dao sect. Kill him. Even if my entire race is destroyed, Morning Dao sect will pay the price. On the 9 planets in the distance, the tribe leader of the dust dews glared at the sacred constellation robe on Su Ming's body and let out a shrill roar. At the same time, the dozens of figures beside him charged towards Su Ming. All of them were old men, sect elders of the dust dews. They had once held the position of tribe leader. At that moment, after they retired from seclusion, they came together at the critical moment when their race was about to be destroyed. Kill me. At the instant Su Ming turned his head around to look, he lifted his right foot and took a swift step forward, charging towards the dozens of incoming people. At the instant they closed in on each other, Su Ming lifted his right hand and pointed at the sky. Mountain shifter. When Su Ming spoke, the sky immediately let out a shocking roar. Countless mountains instantly appeared around Su Ming and pressed down on the dozens of people who were coming towards him. To be continued. If you like this work, please come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1223. Before Su Ming had reached Mastery Realm, he had already been able to kill Almighties and fight against the 8 great Almighties in Mastery Realm when he was in Morning Dao sect's anointment ceremony. Now, not only had Su Ming's level of cultivation increased and gained an epiphany of Mastery Realm, he had also manifested the power of 5 fingers. In fact, due to the grass fusing into his body, he had opened the Abyss Gate. At that moment, Su Ming was a powerful warrior who could fight against those in Life Realm. Even if there were not many Almighties among the dozens of incoming cultivators, they were still not Su Ming's opponent. Once Mountain Shifter art was executed, the world roared. As the sky tumbled about, countless mountains charged at the dozens of people. Loud booming sounds spread in all directions, deafening the ears. The dozens of people coughed up blood and tumbled backwards. Su Ming took a step forward, and he was so quick that he instantly closed in on one of them. He lifted his right hand and tapped the center of the person's brow. The cultivator shuddered, and his life force and soul were instantly sucked away by Su Ming's finger before he was reduced to ashes. Su Ming moved and flashed 17 times in succession. Immediately, before the 17 cultivators could even scream in pain, they disappeared. A vast amount of life force and souls surged into Su Ming's body. At the same time they nourished his Abyss Gate, they also slowed down the pace at which it continuously absorbed his life force. This allowed Su Ming to finally let out a sigh of relief in his heart. His body recovered slightly from its emaciated state. He only looked thin and was no longer as terrifying as before. But it's still not enough. Su Ming lifted his head, and a glint appeared in his eyes. He stared at the 9 planets in the distance, and a malicious and enchanting glare appeared in his eyes. Without a hint of hesitation, he charged forward. Wherever he went, all the cultivators who blocked his path would have their life force and souls washed away, causing Su Ming to look like a fierce tiger on the battlefield. No one dared to stop him, and no one dared to get close to him. His powerful level of cultivation, bizarre divine abilities, and extreme speed caused Su Ming to immediately become the center of attention in the battlefield. As the 5 million cultivators from the War Chamber continued fighting against each other, and the 1 million cultivators from the Immortals Union and the Dust Dews fought back madly, Su Ming turned into a long arc that instantly cut through the battlefield and charged towards the 9 Stars Palace. He was so quick that he almost instantly closed in on one of the planets. As the Dust Dews tribe leader and sect elders roared in anger and dozens of cultivators gritted their teeth and charged towards Su Ming, he did something that shocked both sides on the battlefield, to the point that they even forgot to attack each other. He lifted his right hand, and at the instant that dozens of cultivators closed in on him, he seized the air in the direction of one of the 9 planets. At the same time, an unprecedented suction force came from the Abyss Gate in Su Ming's body. It traveled from his arm to his palm. With a bang, a huge palm manifested in front of Su Ming with his power in Mastery Realm. That palm was an illusion, but it was 100,000 feet big. In the midst of a loud bang, it seized the planet. The power of the Abyss Gate erupted in a vast manner, causing the planet to tremble violently. A drastic change that could shock all those who saw it with their own eyes appeared. All the green plants on the planet withered at that instant. All the rivers instantly dried up. The silent sea turned into a dead sea in the blink of an eye. The sea water dissipated, and the countless ferocious creatures in the sea were reduced to ashes. The ground turned yellow. When it trembled violently, cracks tore through the ground as if there were earth dragons tumbling about. Mountains collapsed, and if anyone looked over, they would see that the planet was swiftly turning yellow. In just the span of a few breaths, the planet looked as if it had gone through its entire life. Its life was swiftly fading away. Wisps of white smoke seeped out of the planet and surged towards Su Ming, who was beyond the planet. They instantly surged into his eyes, ears, nose, and mouth. The planet shrank right before Su Ming's eyes. In the end, it shattered with a bang and turned into countless fragments. When they tumbled backwards, they were reduced to ashes. The lives and essence of the world that enveloped the planet turned into white fog that filled the entire area. It instantly surrounded Su Ming's body. In just the span of a few breaths, when all the white fog was absorbed by Su Ming, he was no longer thin. Instead, he had returned to his original appearance. His black hair danced in the air, and he was dressed in a sacred constellation robe. There seemed to be a third eye at the center of his brows, causing him to be filled with a strange and enchanting air. There was also a thick layer of aura of abyss surrounding him, causing all those who cast a glance at him to feel a chill run down their spines. This scene caused the pupils of all the cultivators in the area to shrink. Their minds instantly turned slightly blank. Destroying a planet was not difficult for Almighties, but Su Ming did not just destroy it. He had completely absorbed the planet's life, force, and essence of soul. Because of that, there was no way the people would not be shocked. In fact, the dozens of Dust Dews who were rushing towards Su Ming came to an abrupt halt. With pale faces, they immediately retreated, not daring to get any closer to Su Ming. After a short period of silence, the battle erupted again. This time, it was not as intense as before, because the cultivators from the Immortals Union seemed to have lost most of their ability to fight back after witnessing Su Ming absorbing the life force from a planet. They no longer had any fighting spirit, but the 5 million cultivators from the War Chamber were the exact opposite. Their raging fighting spirit charged forward with loud bangs, continuously harvesting lives like a hot knife through butter. Su Ming did not bother himself with the two sides in the battlefield. A brilliant light shone in his eyes, and he looked towards the remaining 8 planets. With one move, he charged towards one of them. Time trickled by. About 8 hours later, booming sounds rang out nonstop during those 8 hours. When all 9 planets in the area were absorbed and shattered by Su Ming, the place gradually quietened down. There were countless corpses floating in the galaxy, along with a large number of severed limbs. A bloody stench filled the area. The cultivators from the war chamber were split into 3 groups. 2 groups were chasing after the fleeing cultivators from the Immortals Union, and the remaining group was walking through the battlefield. As long as they saw a corpse that was still in a relatively complete state, they would immediately crush its head. This action was akin to delivering the finishing blow, and it was the habit of the war chamber every time they won a battle. Wherever the war chamber went, there would be no life force left. Another 6 hours passed. When the army from the war chamber who had chased after the fleeing cultivators from the Immortals Union returned, they reorganized themselves slightly and only lost 100,000-something cultivators from the war chamber's earthen pole. They lifted their feet and charged into the distance once more. Booming sounds echoed in the air. The long arcs from the warships, the roars from the huge beasts, and the movement of the planets stirred up ripples in the area. They swept away the floating corpses and the bloody stench in the area. The battle had ended. The murderous aura of the 5 million cultivators from the war chamber's earthen pole became thicker, but when they occasionally turned their heads around to look at the planet, their gazes would be filled with zealousness and respect. Su Ming sat on the planet, still on the mountain belonging to him. He had his eyes closed and was meditating. Plenty of cultivators from the Immortals Union had died in his hands during the battle, and he had even destroyed the Dust Dew's homeland, the 9 planets. From then on, the Dust Dews disappeared. They no longer existed in true Morning Dao world. This was war. There was no right or wrong, only opposition. As Su Ming meditated, the abyss gate in his body was about to turn into an existence that looked like a crystal from its previous form of abyss fog. By the looks of it, most of it had already transformed, and there was just a little more before it would turn into a crystal. Time passed as Su Ming meditated. Battles erupted one after another, causing the war chamber, which had already slaughtered its way into the Immortals Union, to go through a dozen-something battles of varying scales. They were not the only ones. Practically every single day, there would be battle reports sent to Wild Dog using a unique method. Similarly, with Su Ming's status, he naturally had the right to read these battle reports. It could be seen that Morning Dao sect had sent 10 armies of cultivators this time, and most of them numbered in the millions. They slaughtered their way into the Immortals Union from 10 different directions in an attempt to decide the victor in one go. This was the first time Morning Dao sect had launched such a counterattack and launched such an explosive attack. It caught the Immortals Union off guard, and they were forced to retreat continuously. Wherever the 10 armies went, practically no one was left alive. Slaughter surged into the sky, and all races were wiped out. They did not want to surrender. As long as they betrayed the Immortals Union, the only fate awaiting them was the destruction of their entire race. Morning Dao sect's counterattack was like a bolt of lightning, causing true Morning Dao world to be filled with blood during the past few months. The closer they got to the Immortals Union, the stronger the counterattack Morning Dao sect faced. At that moment, the Earthen Pole's war chamber, where Su Ming was located, was about half a month away from the core of the Immortals Union, and a battle that far surpassed the previous one happened. Only nearly 4 million cultivators from the war chamber remained. Their enemy was an army of nearly 3 million cultivators from the Immortals Union, and the battle between the two sides had already lasted for a day. On this day, the number of casualties was so great that Wild Dog had to personally take command. The roars of the gigantic beasts filled many corners of the battlefield. The booming sounds of the battleships collapsing would occasionally ring out, and the 7-colored light from the planet Wild Dog was on would sweep outwards once every hour. There were hundreds of huge eyeballs floating in the sky above the Immortals Union. They were constantly paying attention to all the changes in the battlefield, and under them was a 9-story tower at the back of the Immortals Union. Orders were being sent out from the tower to lead the battle. At the same time, there was a large number of cultivators who clearly belonged to the Immortals. They stood on flying swords and surrounded the tower. Their gazes were ghastly cold as they stared at the cultivators from the war chamber in the distance. In fact, Su Ming saw 2 black-robed people further behind them. The black-robed people were the exact same as the ones he saw in the illusion of Tao Ocean. However, he did not see the giants who were known as ancient gods. But Su Ming had a feeling that there was a high possibility that ancient gods would appear wherever the black-robed people were. There are many reasons why I recommend Chasing Lightning as book number 284, 8383, but I'll only mention one. He's my younger brother, and I have to call his father uncle. The boy came over in the afternoon, and when I asked him that he was only in his teens, I instantly felt embarrassed. Use your power so that I can have some face in front of my relatives. If you like this work, I welcome you to come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1224. Su Ming did not attack. He sat cross-legged on the mountain in the 7-colored planet. As his eyes sparkled, he stared at the area beyond the planet. With his level of cultivation, he could see everything in the battlefield clearly. His gaze was especially focused on the 2 black-robed men. When he narrowed his eyes, deep fighting spirit was contained within them. He had fought against the black-robed man's companion before, but that had been an illusion. It was not real. In it, Su Ming had killed a black-robed man, but at that moment, he was much stronger than when he was in the illusion during the trial. Because of that, he wanted to know just how he would fare when he faced the black-robed man again, or even the ancient gods with 7 stars at the center of their brows. I wonder if I'll compare absorbing an ancient god's life force and soul to a planet. As brilliant light shone in Su Ming's eyes, his fighting spirit became stronger. The battle in the world beyond continued. Booming sounds rang out without end. The casualties on both sides were incredibly high. After all, the cultivators from a war chamber were facing a rather powerful army from the Immortals Union. It was a powerful army of cultivators formed by the elites from various races. In the midst of the booming sounds, Su Ming could hear wild dogs' enraged roars from the planet. Damn it! There are hundreds of eyes of the Phoenix sect. With them around, all our actions will be clearly understood. Someone destroy those hundreds of eyes of the Phoenix sect. At the instant Wild Dog roared, hundreds of cultivators charged out from the warships in the world beyond. They were so quick that they instantly crossed the battlefield and charged toward the eyeballs. But at the instant they closed in, dozens of immortals flew out from around the tower of the Immortals Union. When they swung their arms, countless sun-destroying lightnings charged forward. Booming sounds surged into the sky, causing the hundreds of cultivators from the war chamber to cough up blood and fall back. Almost at the instant they retreated, 3 figures flew out from the platforms behind the war chamber's warships. They had power that surpassed those in Mastery Realm and belonged to those in Fate Realm. When ripples spread out, the 3 figures charged towards the eyeballs. However, the moment they closed in, cold harumphs reverberated in the air around the tower belonging to the Immortals Union. 3 ancient old men moved and exuded power that was also in Fate Realm. They charged towards the 3 people from the war chamber. In the midst of booming sounds, the 6 of them fought against each other. They charged into the sky and opened up another battlefield above. Damn it! As Wild Dog's roars reverberated in the 7-colored planet, Su Ming's pupils shrank slightly. He saw the hundreds of sun-destroying lightnings and instantly felt his heart pound. He stood up swiftly. "I'll help you." His words echoed in the planet, causing a glint to appear in the enraged Wild Dog's eyes. At that moment, Su Ming had already turned into a long arc and charged out of the planet with a loud whistle, charging towards the hundreds of eyes of the Sacred Phoenix sect. His appearance immediately attracted the attention of some of the more observant people in the battlefield, especially the tower belonging to the Immortals Union. At that moment, there was a man with a lackadaisical look on his face. He had his hands placed behind his back, and before him was a huge pearl of light. It reflected almost everything that happened in every corner of the battlefield. He cast a glance at Su Ming, who appeared in the light pearl, and a faint glint appeared in his eyes. A cold sneer appeared on his lips. A direct descendant of Morning Tao sect. Just as he was about to give the order, the man's eyes suddenly focused. He saw Su Ming move, and in the span of a breath, he had already crossed an endless distance to appear beside the hundreds of eyeballs. This speed made the man frown. Kill this man. At the instant he spoke, a glint appeared in the eyes of the dozens of immortals beyond the hundreds of eyeballs. At the instant Su Ming arrived, they charged forward. When they lifted their right hands, they threw out several sun-destroying lightnings simultaneously. There were nearly 100 sun-destroying lightnings, and any one of them could injure a cultivator in Solar Culpa Realm. When there were nearly 100 of them, even those in Mastery Realm would have to avoid their attacks and not face them head-on. A ferocious smile appeared at the corners of Su Ming's lips. He had been waiting for these sun-destroying lightnings. Almost at the instant they charged towards him, Su Ming lifted his right hand and swung his arm forward. Ikang's presence erupted from him and instantly enveloped nearly 100 sun-destroying lightnings. There were no booming sounds, no tremors. The only thing that could be seen was the near 100 sun-destroying lightnings fusing together to turn into drops of faint golden blood. Su Ming sucked all of them into his body. His body let out a bang. As the blood fused together, Su Ming's spirit was shaken. When the immortals were stunned, he moved forward, and he was so quick that he instantly closed in on one of them. He lifted his right hand and struck the center of the cultivator's brows. Without even looking, he appeared in front of the second person. He did the same thing a dozen times, and when he flashed a dozen-something times, booming sounds rang out. The dozen-something cultivators immediately withered and turned into ashes. Their storage bags disappeared after a flash of black light. The bald crane's excited expression appeared in the black light. In a flash, it rushed to another direction in the battlefield. To Su Ming, killing a dozen-something immortals was as easy as taking something out of his pocket. At the instant they died, he lifted his right hand and seized the air in the direction of the sky. The hundreds of eyes of the sacred temple immediately shuddered, and a large amount of blood capillaries instantly appeared within them. At that moment, a cold harumph came from the immortals' union. That voice was still in the distance, but the person who let it out had already crushed space and appeared beside Su Ming in an instant. It was a red-faced old man. He had a large body and looked incredibly strong. He did not look like an old man, but from the back, he looked like a strong man. His hair was white. At the instant he closed in, a wave of power in Life Realm erupted from his body and turned into a mighty pressure that charged towards Su Ming to suppress him. Kneel down. The old man's voice was like a tidal wave. When it reverberated in the air, it was deafening, but at the instant his mighty pressure crashed against Su Ming, he did not pay any attention to the old man in Life Realm. A glint appeared in his eyes, and he cast a glance at the two black-robed men who did not seem to intend to join the battle or perhaps did not think that it was time for them to attack. Su Ming narrowed his eyes, and a sinister smile appeared on his lips. It will be slightly difficult for me to slaughter my way in, but luring you out won't be difficult. At the same time, the bald crane's eyes also shone in the distance. Immediately, a monstrous black light erupted from the bald crane and Su Ming at the same time. The light of extreme darkness. With a whoosh, the black light seemed to have covered time and instantly enveloped the old man. The old man's expression immediately changed. A chill that made even his heart tremble instantly rose from his body. It would have been fine if that was all, but aside from the chill, the old man felt as if his entire body had been pierced by countless arrows. The intense pain caused him to be unable to move at all. At the instant the light of extreme darkness appeared, Su Ming moved. When he lifted his right hand, he did not attack the old man. Instead, he seized the air in the direction of the universe. Booming sounds reverberated in the air, and the hundreds of eyes of the Phoenix sect floating in the sky crumbled at that moment. As each eyeball crumbled, screams of pain rang out, and a body flew out from the shattered eyeball. However, before they could fly far, their bodies shuddered. Their life force and souls were instantly sucked out, and they were reduced to ashes. Good. Wild Dog had been paying attention to this scene from the seven-colored planet, and delight instantly appeared on his face. Without any hesitation, he quickly sent out a series of orders and controlled the army of the war chamber to change their strategy. While the eyes of the Phoenix sect from the Immortals Union had disappeared, the cultivators of the war chamber instantly changed their battle formation and brought out an even greater power. Some chaos also appeared on the side of the Immortals Union at that moment. As the battle continued, the Immortals Union was forced back. Who is this person? The lackadaisical man on the tower of the Immortals Union had an incredibly solemn expression on his face at that moment. Killing intent shone in his eyes, but just as he was about to send out his orders, his expression suddenly changed. He saw one of the two black-robed Grand Immortals walking out of the tower on his own. The two black-robed men were immortals who descended from the first plane in the vast and eternal pillar of light that descended from the endless universe in the core of the Immortals Union. They had noble statuses, and no one could order them around. Even the Parliament of the Immortals Union did not dare to do so. They were allies, but most of the time, they were there to observe the battle. When they believed that it was time for them to attack, they would take action. At that moment, when the man noticed a black-robed man walking out, a smile immediately appeared on his face. He knew that the direct descendant of Morning Dao sect, who had destroyed the eyes of the Phoenix sect, was no longer worthy of his attention. He had seen these Grand Immortals attack before, and their strength was something he could not forget. It was especially so when it came to their divine abilities. Once the Grand Immortals attacked, the weather would definitely change. Interesting. I didn't expect to see Sir Kong Mo's light of extreme darkness here. With disdain on his face and the arrogance of an immortal who had descended in the mortal world, the black-robed man moved forward, and as if space itself had opened up a path for him, he instantly rushed into the light of extreme darkness. The light of extreme darkness disappeared at that moment. Su Ming intentionally put on a look of panic and retreated swiftly, wanting to widen the distance between him and the tower. When Su Ming moved back, the old man in Life Realm, who was still numb, roared in anger. Just as he was about to chase after him, the black-robed man walked past him. "Leave. This is my prey." His faint voice was filled with an air of superiority. When he walked past and chased after Su Ming, the old man in Life Realm came to a halt. His expression changed several times before he extinguished all his anger. He turned around with a dark expression, and without a single word, he charged towards the tower. Su Ming was so quick that he instantly left into the distance. The black-robed man behind him had a scornful look on his face. With each step he took, he would cross an endless distance. With just 3 steps, he caught up to Su Ming, who had already widened the distance between them and was at the edge of the battlefield. "You can't escape. Be a good boy, and let me capture you. I'll search through your memories and find out how a barbarian like you managed to cultivate the light of extreme darkness." There was arrogance in the black-robed man's voice. It was as if he attacked, all the cultivators in Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos would not be able to fight back, or else they would be committing a grave crime. Please give me recommendation votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Achidian. Come to give me recommendation votes or monthly votes. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1225. That tone and that arrogant attitude was something that even Dao Ocean could not imitate, which was why Su Ming had not seen the black-robed man say those words when he was in the illusion during the trial. Now that he heard it, even with Su Ming's wisdom, he could not help but be taken aback. That bold and confident tone, that incredibly strong attitude of being superior to everyone in Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos, that all the barbarians in Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos had to worship him, and that with just one sentence he had to immediately commit suicide. If he did not, he would be going against his superiors. This was the first time Su Ming had met such a strange person. Su Ming's footsteps came to a halt. When he turned his head around, he looked at the black-robed man walking towards him and asked faintly, "If I fight back, I will be committing a great crime?" The black-robed man lifted his head. When he spoke arrogantly, a glint appeared in his eyes hidden under the black robe. "It's not just a great crime. All those who fight back will have their entire family executed. You saw me flee just now, and that is already a great crime. Then what should I do now?" A smile appeared on Su Ming's face because of the old man's words. It had been a long time since he had heard something so laughable, so he could not help but ask, "Humph, destroy your own cultivation base, break your arms and legs, kneel before me, and beg for my punishment. Be a good boy, and let me look through your memories. In the end, offer your soul to me as well, and by doing so, you can still be forgiven for your crimes." The black-robed man looked at Su Ming with an air of superiority, as if he was taking everything for granted. "Lowly barbarian, if you wait for me to make a move, you'll end up 100 times more miserable. You don't even know the difference between you and me. I can turn you into ashes with just a lift of my hand. Giving you the opportunity to kneel is already a great reward. Hurry up and kneel." The black-robed man clasped his hands behind his back and spoke arrogantly. Su Ming was silent. With a gaze filled with incomprehension, he stared at the black-robed man. After some time, he shook his head. Su Ming did not know what to say about such a strange person. "You don't know what's good for you. A barbarian will always be a barbarian. I gave you a chance, but you didn't seize it. You're just asking for death." The black-robed man let out a cold harumph and walked forward, completely unbothered by Su Ming's level of cultivation. He walked right up to him and lifted his right hand to seize Su Ming's throat. "I'll let you know just how big a gap there is between a barbarian like you and this immortal. I'll let you know just how important my words are to you. Now that you've chosen to kneel, this old man will not give you the slightest chance." The black-robed man instantly extended his right hand, and a wave of ripples spread out from his palm, causing his palm to look as if it had pierced through space. In an instant, it appeared before Su Ming and went to seize his throat. "You made 3 mistakes." At the instant the black-robed man's right hand came to seize him, Su Ming lifted his right hand and seized the black-robed man's wrist. With a flick, the destructive power from Su Ming's body surged into the black-robed man's body with a bang. Banging sounds reverberated in the air, and the black-robed man's expression changed. At that moment, Su Ming charged forward and rammed his shoulder into the black-robed man's body. "First mistake. You shouldn't have been so noisy." When the black-robed man coughed up blood, his expression changed drastically, but Su Ming's right hand seized his wrist like a clamp. At the instant the black-robed man coughed up blood, the vast suction force from the abyss gate in Su Ming's body spread out with a bang through his right hand. Immediately, the black-robed man let out a shrill scream of pain. His body started withering right before Su Ming's eyes, and a large amount of his life force was instantly sucked into the abyss gate in his body. "Impossible. Why, you're not in Mastery Realm." As the black-robed man screamed in pain, terror and shock that had never appeared on his face before appeared on his face. At the same time, the expression of the other black-robed man outside the tower changed, and without any hesitation, he charged over. "Second mistake. You shouldn't have been so close to me." Su Ming let go of the black-robed man's right hand, but in an instant, he seized the top of the black-robed man's skull. With a firm grip, the black-robed man's shrill screams of pain reverberated through the entire battlefield. As his body trembled, wisps of white smoke surged out his eyes, ears, nose, and mouth, and were all absorbed by Su Ming's right hand. "Third mistake. You shouldn't have made me so disgusted." At the instant Su Ming said those words, he exerted force in his right hand, and with a crack, he pierced through the black-robed man's skull. At the same time, the last bit of life force and soul erupted from the black-robed man's body and were absorbed by Su Ming. The other black-robed man closed in with a howl. He lifted his right hand and pointed at Su Ming, but before he could execute his divine ability, a glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He seized the black-robed man in his hand and swiftly sent a wisp of his soul into the black-robed man's body, which was now empty of life, force, and soul. At the same time, Su Ming pushed him forward, and his cultivation base erupted with a bang. In fact, the light of extreme darkness also spread out violently. All of this was done in an instant. Immediately after, the other black-robed man pointed at him, and the divine ability he executed appeared in a shocking manner. Immobilize. If Su Ming had not seen this art in the illusion of the trial, he would have definitely suffered a great loss when he ran into it for the first time. However, since he had experienced this strange divine ability, he was already prepared for it. At the instant the word echoed in the air, the light of extreme darkness erupted, and the black-robed man in his hand pushed forward. Immediately, the other black-robed man's divine ability was blocked. With a bang, the black-robed man Su Ming pushed forward came to a swift halt in the galaxy, as if he had been frozen. He attracted all the power of the other black-robed man's immobilization art. The immobilization art locked down on the soul, which was why even if it was blocked, it could still immobilize a person. However, Su Ming had first used the black-robed man in his hand to fuse a wisp of his soul into the other black-robed man's body. Once he passed off the fake as the real one, he immediately lured the immobilization art away. He also had the light of extreme darkness to block it, and because of it, he perfectly broke the immobilization art. All of this might have seemed simple. In fact, to outsiders, there was nothing strange or shocking about it because they did not understand just how powerful the immobilization art was. However, the expression of the black-robed man who had rushed over and executed the art changed drastically. Disbelief appeared in his eyes, and he instinctively took a few steps back. His pupils shrank. He could not imagine that in this barbaric and primitive galaxy, where all the cultivators borrowed and created their own laws and no one understood the power of celestial essence, there would actually be someone who could use the weakness of the immobilization art, a weakness that few people in the 180 expands cosmoses of Saint Defire knew, to break his art. "Sir, who are you?" When the black-robed man retreated, his tone was incredibly solemn. He could no longer treat a person who had killed his companion and even broken the immobilization art as a barbarian. The light of extreme darkness disappeared. Su Ming stared at the black-robed man, who had his face hidden under the black robe, but was clearly incredibly cautious. His pupils constricted slightly, and a brilliant light that no one could notice shone in his eyes. "What rank are you?" Su Ming suddenly asked. At the instant he said those words, the black-robed man's expression changed again, and he was stunned. He was momentarily stunned. At the instant his caution was broken by Su Ming's words. Su Ming took a swift step forward. When he lifted his right hand, he formed his palm into the shape of a sword, and he swiftly cut down on the black-robed man. God Slayer art. Piercing golden light instantly shone on Su Ming's palm. At the same time, the power to cut fate erupted with a bang. Once it changed the laws in the universe around him, it turned into a power that would definitely hit. All of this happened in an instant. The price for the black-robed man's momentary shock was that the golden light from the god of war art on Su Ming's palm was reflected in his eyes. The black-robed man's expression changed. He lifted his right hand and swung it, then seized Su Ming with his withered right hand. Booming sounds surged into the heavens. The power that would definitely hit caused the golden light spreading out from Su Ming's palm to turn into an astonishing sword aura. When it crashed into the black-robed man's right hand, it turned into the third power contained in the God Slayer art, Rebound. The powerful rebound caused the black-robed man to cough up blood. When he fell back, due to the abyss gate in Su Ming's body, all of his divine abilities gained an additional power, causing the fourth change to appear in the slash that contained 3 types of power. A vast power that could absorb life force and souls rose swiftly, causing the black-robed man who had coughed up blood to instantly wither slightly. Even a part of his soul was forcefully sucked away by Su Ming. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He did not give the black-robed man any chance. With the black-robed man's corpse in his hand, he charged towards him. He was so fast that he instantly closed in on him. At the instant, the black-robed man lifted his right hand to cast the immobilization art again. Su Ming managed to resist it once more. Then, he lifted his left hand and struck the black-robed man. The world roared, and the weather changed. A huge palm manifested in front of Su Ming, and as if it was pushing the galaxy, it rammed into the black-robed man's body, causing his robes to flutter. The black-robed man might have resisted it, but he coughed up a huge mouthful of blood. His body fell back like a kite with its string snapped. There was shock and disbelief on his face. At that moment, as he retreated, he remembered something. He remembered the only one of his companions who had died since they were arranged to come to arid Triad Expanse Cosmos. He remembered that he had been killed by Morning Dao Sect during a battle. In fact, he remembered that one of the ancient gods had also been killed by Morning Dao Sect. These things appeared in the black-robed man's mind, and he immediately retreated without any hesitation. At that moment, his status and the attitude of someone who came from the previous Expanse Cosmos were all cast to the back of his mind. He lifted his right hand and formed a seal while fleeing. His cultivation base erupted from his body, and as a ripple spread out, it formed a huge jing. The jing surrounded Su Ming. At the instant the black-robed man charged out of the place to return to the tower, a glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes as he chased after him. He lifted his right hand, but he did not form any seals in front of him. Instead, he swung it casually. Time reversal. 7 breaths ago. The world roared, and the heavens rotated. During that instant, time changed. The jing whirred around, Su Ming disappeared, and the black-robed man was no longer fleeing. Instead, he was moving backwards, returning right in front of Su Ming. Su Ming lifted his right hand and seized the man's throat. Please give me monthly votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please Kamachidian. Come to give me recommendation votes and monthly votes. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 12:26. Who made you descend to arid Triad Expanse Cosmos? Su Ming held the black-robed man's neck tightly and whispered into his ear. You barbarian, even if you have mastered the power of the third step, you are still a barbarian. The black-robed man said in a shrill voice. Once Su Ming seized his neck, his cultivation base swiftly disappeared. In an instant, it turned into nothingness. His life force and soul were also swiftly sucked away. The feeling of weakness made him remember when he was still immortal. Who made you descend to arid Triad Expanse Cosmos? Su Ming asked again, and a strange light shone in his eyes. When the black-robed man heard his words, he laughed fiercely, and his face was filled with derision. No one can search through our souls. Even if you have nearly attained completion in the third step, you still don't have the right to search through our souls. Do you want to know the answer? Go search for it yourself. As the black-robed man laughed, a smile suddenly appeared at the corners of Su Ming's lips. The third eye at the center of his brow opened, and at the instant it revealed an almost bewitching look, he spoke softly. Thank you. At the instant Su Ming said those 2 words, the third eye at the center of his brow shone with a bewitching light. When Su Ming looked over, the black-robed man's eyes were instantly magnified endlessly. With a loud whoosh, Su Ming saw a figure in the depths of the black-robed man's pupils. The eyes were the entrance to the soul. A person's personality and soul could be seen through their eyes. This was not some sort of divine ability. In fact, even some of the old mortals who had lived through the vicissitudes of life could do this. It was even more so for Su Ming. With his third eye, he could see the black-robed man's soul. There was no need for him to perform a soul search. Even if the black-robed man's soul had a seal protecting his memories, Su Ming did not perform a soul search forcefully. He did not forcefully fight against the seal either. He only watched with another method. By doing so, he would not trigger the protection placed on the black-robed man's memories, because Su Ming did not perform a soul search. He had asked the same question twice, but his goal was not to make the man answer, but to lure him. Those words were just a catalyst. Su Ming needed to use this catalyst to make the answer appear in the black-robed man's subconscious mind. Su Ming would use his third eye to see through the black-robed man's eyes and see the answer in his soul. He saw that in the depths of the black-robed man's eyes, in his soul, there was a middle-aged man. This man wore a blue robe and had long black hair. His robe was extremely luxurious, and there was a strange pattern embroidered on it that seemed to represent yin and yang. The man was incredibly handsome, but there was an endless amount of ancient air about him. There was also a power that caused even Su Ming's heart to tremble. Almost at the instant Su Ming saw the figure in the black-robed man's eyes, the afterimage that was originally a memory and an illusion suddenly shone with a dazzling light, and as if it had suddenly gained intelligence, the afterimage looked towards Su Ming and let out a soft gasp of surprise. There's actually a cultivator like you in the savage, primitive world of Arid Triad. You managed to form a connection with me, Xing Ji Dao, with such a method? Interesting. Since you're here, then don't leave. A glint appeared in the blue-robed man's eyes. There was a smile on his face, but there was a vortex in his eyes that instantly sucked in Su Ming, as if he wanted to follow Su Ming's gaze and enter his soul to drag it over. Yet at that moment, the seed of life extermination in Su Ming's soul swiftly resisted. As booming sounds reverberated in the air, a brilliant light shone in the blue-robed man's eyes, along with a hint of shock and ferociousness. The power of Dark Dawn. Suddenly, at the instant the seed of life extermination resisted, a powerful devouring power erupted from the abyss gate in Su Ming's body in a crazed manner. It sucked in a sharp breath and devoured a small part of the power spreading out from the blue-robed man's afterimage, cutting off the connection between the two. The presence of the abyss. You're an abyss builder from Arid Triad. A low roar that caused Su Ming's soul to tremble came from the broken connection. Just the remaining presence alone already surpassed all the powerful warriors Su Ming had met in his life. In fact, it was even stronger than Sui Chunzi's. Boom! Su Ming closed his third eye, and his gaze disappeared from the black-robed man's eyes. Everything that had happened just then might not have seemed to have lasted for a short period of time, but in truth, it had only happened in the blink of an eye. The strength of the person called Xing Ji Dao shocked Su Ming, and at the same time, he gained a clearer understanding of the 180 expanse cosmos's insane fire. What did you do to me? The black-robed man whose throat was seized by Su Ming shuddered. He could sense the intense change in his body just then. It might have only lasted for a short moment, but it had shocked him to the core. Xing Ji Dao, Su Ming said flatly while casting the black-robed man a glance. The black-robed man's expression instantly changed drastically, but before he could say anything, Su Ming squeezed his right hand. With a bang, the black-robed man's body shattered to pieces. His soul and life force turned into wisps of white smoke that surged into Su Ming's eyes, ears, nose, and mouth before he sucked them all in one gulp. At the same time, the abyss gate in his body let out a loud roar. The life force and souls from the two black-robed men had already caused the abyss gate to swell slightly, but what truly caused it to let out such a loud roar spread out a vast amount of aura of abyss, and fill Su Ming's entire body was the small portion of what he had devoured from Xing Ji Dao's afterimage. To the current Su Ming and the abyss gate, this could be said to be an unprecedented great supplement. It was a great supplement that was 100 times stronger than when Su Ming absorbed the 9 planets. During that instant, Su Ming shuddered, and he threw his head back to let out a low roar. As he did so, a loud bang shot up in his body. The vortex of aura of abyss that was like a bottomless pit turned into crystal. It continued growing larger, and once it occupied a small portion of Su Ming's body, it shattered, and a black gate appeared within it. The aura of abyss spreading out from it was incredibly terrifying. It was instantly absorbed by Su Ming's physical body, but his body seemed to be rejecting it and could not absorb too much of it. However, even though he had only absorbed a small portion of it, booming sounds came from Su Ming's body, and the strength of his physical body increased exponentially by 1-fold. Su Ming's physical body had always been incredibly strong, and right then it had reached a terrifying state, but what was even more terrifying was his right hand. It was the only part of his body that could perfectly fuse with the aura of Abyss and continuously absorb it. If Su Ming's current body was already so strong that it was terrifying, then if he needed to, his right hand could easily destroy an enemy with such a physical body. It was a telling sign of how strong his right hand had become after it absorbed the aura of Abyss. After all, his right hand came from his real physical body. It could perfectly fuse with the Abyss Builder's inborn ability, and from there, an indescribably vast power that truly belonged to the Abyss Builders erupted from it. The power of the Abyss Gate isn't an inborn ability prepared to strengthen the physical bodies of Abyss Builders. Its true function is to create an abyssal world that belongs to us once we open the Abyss Gate. Strengthening my physical body is just a supplementary power. If I can seize back my real physical body, then with this sort of strengthening, my physical body can be said to be indestructible. A brilliant light shone in Su Ming's eyes. At that moment, he suddenly lifted his head and stared at the spot where the tower belonging to the Immortals' Union was located. At that moment, the expression of the young man who was the leader of the Immortals' Union in the tower had already twisted. Disbelief appeared in his eyes. He had personally seen the two black-robed Grand Immortals being killed by Su Ming. The shock brought to him by this scene caused his breathing to quicken. The hearts of all the Immortals outside the tower trembled. They stared at Su Ming in shock. In fact, Su Ming's battle against the two black-robed men had even affected the situation of the battlefield around him. The roars from the war chamber became much louder at that moment. As they slaughtered their enemies, the cultivators from the Immortals' Union continued retreating. But at that moment, when Su Ming cast his gaze towards the tower, he saw the space behind it. A gigantic rune swiftly appeared there. It instantly shone with a light that reached 100,000 feet. A low roar came from within it, and it brought with it a loud bang that shook the sky and earth. It brought with it a mighty pressure that was as great as thunder. At the instant it descended, it turned into a powerful wave of impact that swept through the area. Countless cultivators tumbled backwards. As their expressions changed, they saw a scene they would never forget for the rest of their lives. They saw the outline of a gigantic figure within the gigantic rune. It was thousands of feet tall, and it was a giant. He took a huge step forward and walked out of the rune, then threw his head back and roared. There were 7 shining stars at the center of his brows, and a wild and crazed aura erupted from his body without holding anything back. This aura was violent and ferocious. At the instant it filled the galaxy, his body swayed and grew from thousands of feet tall to 10,000 feet tall. When he lifted his right hand, a gigantic battle axe appeared in his hand. Countless bolts of lightning swam on it, and they spread out in all directions. The thick bolts of lightning would require several people to surround them, and as they swept through the area, the giant's mighty presence became incomparable for a period of time. After a short period of silence, all the cultivators from the Immortals' Union let out a loud cheer. As they cheered, they immediately moved back, revealing an empty space in the galaxy. They surrounded the area, and their cheers echoed in the air. God! 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 All the cultivators from the Immortals' Union roared together. At that instant, their voices filled the entire galaxy, causing the faces of the cultivators from the war chamber to turn pale. They stared at the 10,000 feet tall giant in shock, and the only thing that echoed in their hearts was the one word shouted by the cultivators from the Immortals' Union. God, do you dare fight against me? The ancient god with the huge axe looked at Su Ming with a disdainful gaze. He lifted his left hand and hooked it in Su Ming's direction. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1227. As the cultivators from the Immortals' union spread out, the cultivators from the war chamber were also intimidated by the powerful ancient god. Under the orders of their commander, Wild Dog, they gradually moved back and opened up an empty spot in the universe. The empty universe belonged only to Su Ming and the ancient god. Su Ming's expression was aloof. He stared at the ancient god, who was 10,000 feet tall, and his pupils shrank slightly. Once he focused his gaze on the center of the ancient god's brows, he could vaguely tell from the mighty pressure spreading out that this was an almighty in Mastery Realm. However, it was impossible to determine the combat abilities of the people from St. Fire Expanse Cosmos based on their presences. After all, the two black-robed men did not seem to have reached Mastery Realm. They were only in Solar Culpa Realm. However, the combat abilities that erupted from them could easily kill those in Mastery Realm. Even those in Fate Realm would have to retreat before them. They had the same level of cultivation and presence, but there was such a huge difference between them. It would have been fine if it was just one person, but it was clearly not a difference between individuals. This was the fundamental difference between the cultivators from the 180 Expanse Cosmoses of St. Fire and Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos. This was enough to tell that while the cultivators from Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos might seem to be very powerful in terms of the usage of their cultivation bases, their strength was just superficial. It was not the true power of their cultivation bases. The Immortals' levels of cultivation are also divided into the second step and second step. The black-robed man mentioned that I am near completion in the third step, and the combat abilities I displayed are equivalent to those in Life Realm. If that's the case, could it be that this near completion in the third step is equivalent to Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos Life Realm? But isn't this a little too exaggerated? After all, I can fight against those in Life Realm from Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos, but it doesn't mean that I can win against those in St. Fire Expanse Cosmos who are near completion in the third step. Then what about Death Realm? Is it the so-called Great Completion in the third step, or does it surpass that Great Completion and reach another height in the cultivation system of the 180 Expanse Cosmoses in St. Fire? There's also the Sublime Paragon. Which level in St. Fire Expanse Cosmos is corresponding to? There's also Avacania Realm. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He remembered the masters of fate, lives, and death he had met in the past. Some of them were strong, and some were weak. He remembered that he had manifested 5 fingers in Mastery Realm, but there were far too many people who had only manifested 1 or 2 fingers. As Su Ming's eyes sparkled, he stared at the 10,000 feet tall ancient god and suddenly asked, "Then what level of cultivation do the two black-robed men belong to in St. Fire Expanse Cosmos? We can fight, but I want to know what the cultivation levels of the 2 black-robed men I killed were in your world. You want to know? You're only qualified to know if you can withstand one of my attacks." The 10,000 feet tall ancient god threw his head back and laughed. He took a swift step forward and instantly closed in on Su Ming. He lifted his left hand and used the simplest method to throw a punch at Su Ming. A brilliant light shone in Su Ming's eyes. He did not use his strongest right hand. Instead, he brought up his left hand and threw a punch forward. Once it crashed into the ancient god's fist through space, a loud bang that shook the sky and earth reverberated in space. Su Ming let out a muffled groan and swayed, but the ancient god immediately took a few steps back. Interesting. It's rare to see a powerful warrior who has mastered the essence energy of this expanse cosmos in this barbaric land. It's no wonder then why those 2 disgusting immortal cultivators were killed by you. They did not die in vain. The 10,000 feet tall ancient god threw his head back and laughed. He was not bothered by the fact that he had been forced a few steps back. His voice reverberated in space, and there was a desire to fight to his heart's content. Those 2 cultivators who are the lords of the immortal world are at the peak of the second step in my homeland, and they are half a step into the third step. As for you, even if you have mastered the essence energy of this expanse cosmos, you're not near the peak of the third step, as they say. This is also why I hate those cultivators in the immortal world. Even if they die, they bring disaster to others. This sort of people only know how to plot against others, and they are not fit to be warriors. If you can withstand one of my attacks, then I will tell you the truth. The combat power you can bring forth is only equivalent to your level of cultivation in my homeland. Your true level of cultivation is at the third step in Nirvana Void Realm in my homeland. As for those old monsters who are near the peak of the third step, they only need to lift a finger to kill a cultivator like you 1,000,000 times over. The words from the 10,000 feet tall ancient god caused Su Ming's heart to tremble. He had been puzzled about his level of cultivation and had guessed that the black-robed man had intentionally said those words to confuse his senses. Because of it, he would be able to create a false impression of himself, and there was a high possibility that this false impression would become the cause of his death in the future. When he heard the ancient god's words, Su Ming's mind instantly became much clearer. How many realms are there in the third step in your homeland? Su Ming asked again. Only if you can withstand my attack will you have a right to know. The ancient god's eyes burned with fighting spirit. He took another step towards Su Ming. This time, when he lifted his right hand, he let go of the axe, but the 7 stars at the center of his brows shone with a piercing light. A power that was several times stronger than before erupted from his body with a bang and turned into a punch with his right hand. With a fighting spirit that could crush the universe, he threw a punch at Su Ming. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He stared at the ancient god, closing in on him with a monstrous presence, but he did not retreat. Instead, he moved forward. This time, Su Ming still did not use his right hand. He still used his left hand, but he did not use a punch like before to fight against the attack. Instead, at the instant the ancient god's right fist closed in on him, he turned around and used his back to fight against the attack. At the same time, he struck his chest with his left hand. Boom! The booming sounds that surged into the sky were deafening to the ears, causing the hearts of all the cultivators who witnessed this scene to tremble. All of them fell back, and their expressions changed drastically. Su Ming moved in the sky. When he turned around, his expression remained the same. Not a single hint of change could be detected on his face, but the 10,000 feet tall ancient god shuddered and coughed up a mouthful of blood. He was forced back continuously, and only when he was thousands of feet away did he stop. When he lifted his head, a ferocious look appeared on his face, but there was a hint of shock hidden under it. Celestial essence of tremors. You still haven't answered my question, Su Ming said faintly. I know why you possess the presence of third step Nirvana Void Realm. There are plenty of people in this place who possess this presence, but none of them live up to their names, while you're able to match up to this level of cultivation. Because your physical body is comparable to ours, and your level of cultivation is comparable to immortals. Because of that, you possess the essence energy of this expanse cosmos, and you can even bring forth power that surpasses your own level of cultivation. You might be in Nirvana Void Realm, but you can bring forth power that is close to Spirit Void Realm. The 10,000 feet tall ancient god wiped off the blood at the corners of his mouth. When he looked at Su Ming, a hint of madness appeared in the fighting spirit in his eyes. In my homeland, there are 4 realms in the third step. It's fine for me to tell you. Nirvana, Spirit, Arcane Disaster, and the Masters of Fate, Lives, and Death of this expanse cosmos might have different names, but they correspond to each other. However, the Death realm in this expanse cosmos is slightly strange, so I can't match them perfectly. The 10,000 feet tall ancient god kept to his promise and spoke without hiding anything. Su Ming's heart trembled, and a huge storm raged in his mind. As I expected, the Masters of Fate, Lives, and Death correspond to the 4 great realms in the third step of Saint Fire. As for Death realm, there is naturally something strange about it, since it is the final realm for the Masters of Fate, Lives, and Death. However, the Masters of Fate, Lives, and Death must possess combat abilities that truly match their realms. Only then can they be considered as true almighties. It's no wonder why the people from Saint Fire said that this place is filled with barbarians and savages. It's no wonder why they acted so arrogantly when they came here. In fact, when they killed Almighties, they were clearly delighted, because in their world, those who possessed the presence of Almighties were existences that made them tremble and worship them. But in this place, there were plenty of people who possessed such presences, but it was very easy for them to kill them. If that's the case, then I understand now. It's no wonder why I can jump levels and kill Almighties. It's not because I'm strong, but because they're weak. Unless there are a handful of Almighties who have truly obtained combat abilities that match their realms, most of the other Almighties in Mastery Realm are equivalent to those in the second step in Saint D Fire. It's the same for those in Fate Realm, which is why the black-robed people can kill those in Mastery Realm, while those in Fate Realm need to be slightly more serious, because those in Fate Realm who have not mastered the essence energy of this expanse cosmos are in truth the same level of cultivation as the black-robed people. But the black-robed people can use all sorts of strange divine abilities to gain the upper hand. Those in Life Realm who have not mastered the essence energy of this expanse cosmos, which is the level of combat abilities I possessed in Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos, are in truth Nirvana Void Realm, which is why the black-robed people will not provoke the Almighties in Life Realm in Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos, because they cannot win against them, because they only have half a foot in the third step. They haven't completely become powerful warriors in Nirvana Void Realm. The terrifying 180 expanse cosmoses of Saint D Fire. Just how many Almighties in the third step do they have? Some of them have not even reached the third step, but they're already so strong. Su Ming's pupil shrank. He thought of his own level of cultivation. He originally thought that he was already very strong, but only then did he realize that while he could be considered a powerful warrior in Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos, if he was placed in Saint D Fire's camp, he would only be at the bottom of the third step. There were clearly quite a number of old monsters above him who could easily kill him. But because of that, it'll be much easier to determine the cultivation bases and combat abilities of the cultivators in Saint D Fire's camp. That ancient god's presence is that of someone in Mastery Realm, which means that he's a true cultivator in Mastery Realm, which is the third step in Saint D Fire's Essence Void Realm. He's equivalent to those in Life Realm who have not mastered the essence energy of this expanse cosmos. His level of cultivation is the same as mine, but since he's an ancient god, his combat abilities will be stronger. But in this battle, he won't be able to win against me, because the power in my right hand can bring forth power that is practically surpassing those in Life Realm who have not mastered the so-called essence energy of this expanse cosmos. It's also the corresponding third step spirit void realm the ancient god spoke of. If I can think of these problems, then the ancient god must have understood them a long time ago. That's why even if he was forced back twice by me, he still dared to fight against me again. A brilliant light shone in Su Ming's eyes, and a powerful fighting spirit appeared in his eyes. If you want to fight, then let's fight. At the instant fighting spirit appeared in Su Ming's eyes, the 10,000 feet tall ancient god grabbed the battle axe with his right hand, threw his head back, and roared. His body swelled up to tens of thousands of feet again. He took a step forward, and the battle axe in his hand sliced through the sky. With a piercing whistle, he charged towards Su Ming with loud, booming sounds. The first update is here, asking for a monthly ticket to be continued. If you like this work, please come at Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1228. Both sides instantly closed in on each other. A shocking bang reverberated in the air, and Su Ming's right hand crashed into the ancient god's battle axe. Su Ming shuddered and took 3 steps back, but the ancient god shuddered. His battle axe shattered to pieces, and he took a dozen steps back in succession, moving tens of thousands of feet away from his original spot. How delightful. Come, let's do it again. The ancient god threw his head back and roared. His body swelled up again, and as the 7 stars at the center of his brows shone brightly, he charged towards Su Ming again without any hesitation. In the distance of the battlefield in the sky was a space. No one noticed that there was a middle-aged man sitting cross-legged there. He was dressed in a black robe, and his expression was apathetic. There was not a hint of emotion on his face. He sat quietly. His body seemed to have fused with the universe, causing others to be unable to see any changes in his aura. In fact, not a single hint of life could be sensed from the middle-aged man's body. He was like a puppet. When he sat cross-legged, he did not move. Only a dark light would occasionally shine in his eyes. He stared at Su Ming, who was fighting against the 10,000 feet tall ancient god in the distance, and asked as if he was talking to himself, "I discovered Dao Kong. Should I activate the plan to replace him?" At the instant he spoke, the dark light in his eyes flashed even faster. At the same time, in the core of the Immortals Union was a galaxy surrounded by a thick layer of fog that had suddenly appeared many years ago. A thick pillar of light could be vaguely seen descending from the galaxy. It had been there for many years, and every once in a while, an afterimage would descend from within it in a flickering manner. At that moment, there were thousands of immortals sitting and meditating around the pillar of light. There were 3 people who were the closest to the pillar of light. One of them was an incredibly beautiful woman dressed in white. Her expression was aloof, and she was Bai Ling, the sacred lady of Phoenix sect, who could use that cold expression to speak gentle words of love to Su Ming in an attempt to make him fall into a daze. Beside her stood a black-robed man. His aura was faintly discernible, like wisps of smoke swirling around him. It was as if he was incompatible with the sky, but he was forcefully staying in this world. His appearance was about the same as the black-robed men Su Ming had met before, but his level of cultivation was clearly much higher than those black-robed men's. There was also an awe-inspiring presence about him that the other black-robed men did not possess. It was an awe-inspiring presence that was naturally formed due to being in a high position for a long period of time. There was another person by his side. He was an old man with a head full of white hair and wore a long gray robe. He might be old, but if Su Ming was here, he would definitely be able to tell with just one glance that this old man's appearance was incredibly similar to the Dition in his memories. However, at that moment, this person was clearly much older. He was no longer wearing the emperor's robe or crown, but when he stood there, he gave off a pressure that was even stronger than the black-robed man's. His expression was dignified without being angry, and his eyes were so deep that they seemed to contain the universe. There were 6 pictures in the huge pillar of light before them at that moment. Within them were Dao Hua, Dao Lin, and Su Ming. As for the other 3 pictures, there were 3 middle-aged men. They had unfamiliar appearances, but the power spreading out from them was incredibly strong. Besides Su Ming, the other 5 were with the army of cultivators from Morning Dao sect and were engaged in a chaotic battle against the cultivators from the Immortals Union. Only Su Ming was fighting against the ancient god, 3 dynasts who walk in the light, and 3 hidden dynasts who hide in the darkness. Are these the 6 dynasts of Morning Dao sect? The black-robed man asked in a hoarse voice. He seemed to be laughing, but there was scorn in his laughter. Besides him, the others are all trash. The black-robed man lifted his withered right hand and pointed at the pillar of light. Immediately, the picture belonging to Su Ming became clear and appeared before the 3 of them. Once you control these 6 dynasts, it will be the same as you controlling Morning Dao sect. Even if this is a fake image released by Morning Dao sect, it's fine. If worst comes to worst, you will just fail, Bai Ling said coldly. Morning Dao sect. That Su Xian, who made me very curious. What is his goal? Is it because of his son's corpse? Does he want to turn the entire true Morning Dao world into his abyss builder? Or does he want to stir up a war between Saint Fire and Dark Dawn? The black-robed man shook his head. Neither. If he wanted that corpse, he could have taken it away after countless years and before I descended. Turning him into an abyss builder isn't realistic. As for stirring up a war, I'm very curious. If he wanted to stir up a war, why did he plan to destroy Dark Dawn's relocation path so that only Saint Fire could descend? My old friend, forgive me for forgetting your name. You won't mind if I call you Sublime Paragon Tion, right? When the black-robed man spoke in a hoarse voice, he turned his head to look at the gray-robed old man. That a good name? Tion said faintly. Then what is your old friend, Su Xian, the remnant of the Abyss Builders, the one who married a woman from Dark Dawn, and whose entire race once belonged to Dark Dawn. I'm very puzzled. He has been letting us descend all this while, so why is he launching a full-on counterattack now? The black-robed man frowned. And this dynast Dao Kong is the person in control of the fifth kiln, Su Xianyi's son. The predecessor of Dao Ocean told me that he isn't. As for Su Xianyi's thoughts, he's a lunatic. I might have fought against him for most of my life, but I still find it difficult to guess what a lunatic is thinking. But at the end of the day, it's just to make the Abyss Builders rise to power. Di Tian was silent for a moment before he shook his head. Since the predecessor of Dao Ocean said this, then this Dao Kong is a fake Su Xian, he spread out. He wants to use him to attract our attention so that we can protect his true son. No wonder Dao Kong's matters in Morning Dao sect have spread like wildfire. The black-robed man shook his head. Is Su Xianyi's thoughts that important? If a great celestial paragon from Saint Defire's camp descends, then everything here can be solved, Bai Ling said faintly. The barrier to arid triad expanse cosmos isn't so easy to break. We've been invading and preparing for so many years, but at most, we can only send an almighty and void triad. If you can occupy an entire true world, then you can reduce the difficulty for us from Saint Defire to descend. In fact, the three paragons of Saint Defire, the three supreme existences, are very interested in descending to this place. The black-robed man smiled faintly. All right, since we can be certain that this Dao Kong isn't Su Xianyi's son and isn't an Abyss Builder, then we'll replace him with him. Of course, the main point is still Dao Kong. I'm very interested in this person. The black-robed man swung his arm, and the picture of Su Ming in the Pillar of Light immediately turned illusory again. The physical body of Su Xianyi's son is already missing an arm. I've already prepared all the materials you promised me in the past. When will you help me change my life? If I also become an Abyss Builder, then your plans in Saint Defire's camp will be carried out even more perfectly, Di Tian said calmly, while lifting his head to look at the black-robed man. It's a pity that I chose Sang in the beginning. He could be more compatible with that physical body, but as a former Sublime Paragon, you have the right to do so. 3 months later, an almighty from Saint Defire will descend. His name is Xing Ji, and he has the same status as me. We're both sect lords of the immortal world's 8 paramount Daos. He will bring the supreme treasure that the 3 saints from Saint Defire have fused with for tens of thousands of years. With the preparations you made previously, he has a 5/10 chance of changing your life and turning you into an Abyss Builder. However, you must also be prepared for failure, the black-robed man said faintly. He walked into the Pillar of Light, sat down cross-legged, and did not move. At the same time, a glint appeared in Bai Ling's eyes. She lifted her hand, formed a seal, and pointed at the Pillar of Light. Immediately, the 6 pictures in the pillar shone with a dazzling light. When they surrounded the black-robed man, a glint appeared in the eyes of a cultivator from Morning Dao sect in Dao Hua's picture. Then, he crumbled and turned into a layer of fog that spread out in all directions. When it stirred up chaos, Dao Hua shuddered, and a strange light appeared in his eyes. Similar scenes played out one after another in the other scenes. Dao Lin and the 3 hidden palace lords also experienced all sorts of accidents. It was difficult for others to notice, but they all seemed to have become completely different people. However, they recovered in the blink of an eye. However, the others did not know that they were no longer themselves. In fact, the sudden change caused them to be unable to activate the protection of the flourishing lotuses on their bodies. It was as if they had been possessed. The only picture that did not change was the one of Su Ming fighting against the ancient god. This picture surrounded the black-robed man, and he seemed to hesitate for a moment. Oh well, the immortal paragon of Saint Defire will naturally communicate with the ancient paragon about the ancient god dying in battle. I'm far away in Arid Triad, and there are plenty of things I can't worry about. After all, when the cultivators of the immortal world die, the ancient gods will just watch, right? The black-robed man mumbled, then lifted his right hand and pointed at the ancient god in the picture. At the same time, A dark light shone in the eyes of the person meditating with an apathetic expression in the battlefield where the war chamber fought against the Immortals' Union. His body immediately disappeared. Soon after, when Su Ming and the ancient god crashed into each other, booming sounds reverberated in space. The ancient god coughed up a mouthful of blood. When he forced Su Ming back, his body also moved back, but an even stronger fighting spirit erupted from his eyes. He roared, but just as he was about to take a step forward, his body suddenly shuddered, as if some strange divine ability had descended on him in an invisible manner. As he trembled, a bang came from the center of his brows. 1, 2, 3. When all 7 stars shattered, they turned into a destructive power that could self-destruct. At the instant, fear and anger appeared in his eyes. The ancient god with 7 stars self-destructed, slightly edited, to be continued. If you like this work, please come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1229. Damn it. Ode to the War Chamber. The moment the 7 stars of the ancient god shattered one by one, a destructive force rapidly increased in an indescribable manner. A roar filled with anxiety and madness came from the planet belonging to the war chamber. The middle-aged man, known as Wild Dog, rushed out in an instant. As he roared, he spread his arms wide open. At the instant his cultivation base erupted, dozens of figures in armor appeared beside him, and all of them revealed their cultivation bases. In fact, even though the millions of cultivators from the war chamber did not know what was happening, the subconscious reaction formed by the words "Ode to the War Chamber" in their souls caused them to immediately bring out their full cultivation bases without any hesitation. This was the war chamber that was like an army, the sharp blade of Morning Tao sect. It was precisely because they were like an army that the speed at which their cultivation bases erupted reached its peak. When their cultivation bases erupted, a rune immediately appeared under their feet. Millions of cultivators fused together to form a huge rune, and at the instant it appeared, the ancient god self-destructed. With a bang, the power of the ancient god's shattered planets exploded. It was enough to destroy everything. The moment the rune of the cultivators from the war chamber was relocated, it was immediately affected by the destructive power. Half of them died, but the remaining half of the cultivators from the war chamber were relocated. Since the war chamber was in existence similar to an army, they had a unified order. Each person's will was centered around their leader, which was why their reaction speed was flawless. But it was different for the Immortals' Union. They were an alliance formed by various races fusing together. Even though they had a leader, no flaws could usually be seen on normal days. And even if they were fighting against Morning Tao sect, they would still possess powerful combat prowess. But during the critical moment of life and death, they did not have a unified will and will. That was why it was impossible for them to escape from the area where the 7-starred ancient god self-destructed within a short period of time. As the 7-starred ancient god self-destructed, a loud bang that surged into the sky swept out in all directions. All the cultivators from the Immortals' Union in the area, including the tower, were destroyed in an instant. There were no screams of pain, no struggles. Everything was reduced to ashes in an instant. The spot where Su Ming stood was the spot where the strongest explosion from the self-destruction would erupt. A powerful sense of life-threatening danger instantly surged in Su Ming's heart and soul. It was a feeling he had not experienced for a long time. His pupils shrank, and he lifted his right hand swiftly. At the same time, a kang in his body spread out its presence and enveloped Su Ming. In the eyes of all the immortals who saw this through the screen in the pillar of light, right at the instant they thought that Su Ming was going to fight back, a black soul thread that no one else could see fused with the destructive power and charged towards Su Ming. Su Ming's actions immediately caused the expressions of all the people to change. Because Su Ming did not fight against the destructive power of the 7-starred ancient god's self-destruction as they thought he would. Instead, at the instant the destructive power swept towards him, he gathered all his cultivation base in his right hand and punched the space behind him. As his cultivation base erupted from his body, his third eye at the center of his brows flashed rapidly and magnified the space around him. Su Ming's punch landed on the weakest spot in space, causing it to roar and tear apart. It was as if a tear had been torn on a piece of paper. Su Ming moved, and at the instant the destructive power closed in on him, he stepped into the tear in space and instantly left into the distance. This was definitely not a method an ordinary cultivator could think of. In fact, some of the people who had higher levels of cultivation than Su Ming would find it difficult to think of this method in an instant. This required an incredibly great amount of experience, and only those who had gone through unique experiences could think of this. What made Su Ming think of this method was when he was in Divine Essence Star Ocean. When he subdued the resentful way, he had gone through various relocation spots in Divine Essence Star Ocean. The scenes of him moving about in the strange world under space were the true reason why Su Ming could think of this method. There was another world under space. There were countless unknowns there, and it was as if it was beyond the universe. With a bang, Su Ming fled into the crack in space and entered the unknown universe beyond it. The destructive power charged towards him, causing the crack in space to continuously grow larger. It was immediately filled with chaos. At the same time, the soul thread that wanted to take Su Ming's place crawled into the universe under the crack in space and chased after him. At that moment, a glint appeared in Bai Ling's eyes beyond the pillar of light at the core of the Immortals Union. Dition also frowned slightly. The black-robed man in the pillar of light was momentarily stunned before a brilliant light shone in his eyes. What an interesting lad. He actually managed to think of this method. But the crack in space is the world beyond the universe. The dangers there are so great that even I do not dare to step into it carelessly. That is a chaotic world. There is no life there, only a boundless, chaotic ocean that can crush all wills and life force. It's a pity for that soul thread of mine, though. It's a soul thread that contains part of my memories. Oh well, since I chased after it and my connection with it has been cut off by the chaotic ocean, there's no need for me to bother with it anymore. It's impossible for Dao Kong to continue living. He's already dead. The black-robed man shook his head, got up, and walked out of the pillar of light. With a swing of his arm, the picture in the pillar of light that represented Su Ming immediately shattered and disappeared. The spot where the war chamber and the cultivators of the Immortals Union had previously fought was now empty. Not a single soul remained. All the cultivators from the Immortals Union had died. Half of the cultivators from the war chamber had been relocated, and the crack in space was rapidly shrinking before eventually closing up once more. When it completely closed up, the battle in this place came to an end. Su Ming had disappeared. There was no flame fiend beside him, no Zhu Kai, no abyss dragon, and not even the bald crane. He was alone. He disappeared from the universe and entered the unfamiliar world in space. Almost every year, there would be cultivators who fell into that place, but over the course of countless years, no one managed to walk out. All the lives who had entered space beyond the universe, due to various reasons, had died without a single sound. Damn it. Damn it all. Darn it all, I hate those ancient gods the most. But they won't self-destruct so easily. They shouldn't have self-destructed. They shouldn't have self-destructed, much less all 7 stars. A distortion appeared in the empty universe, and the bald crane's figure appeared. There was anxiety on its face. It stared at the spot where Su Ming had disappeared, and madness appeared on its face. The space beyond the universe is dangerous. It's very dangerous. Darn it all. The bald crane gritted its teeth. With a single move, it instantly fused with space. With its divine ability, it fled into the strange world beyond the universe without tearing a crack. Damn it, why is my life so bitter? I don't want to come here anymore, I don't want to. Could it be that I've been here before? The bald crane was momentarily stunned, but immediately after, an indescribable wave of air surged towards it with a bang. It shattered the bald crane's body into countless shards that were swept into the wave and disappeared. After some time, the shards fused together and turned back into the bald crane. It roared and cursed loudly while searching the area around it. This was a colorful world. There were all sorts of lights in it, and they intersected with each other to form something that looked like a wave. Balls of air that could tear apart all existences swept up the light and charged into the boundless world. Air could sweep up light and leave, but this was something that could not be done wantonly in the world outside. It was impossible because light was just light. It had no form, but air could be sensed. These two completely different substances could not sweep up each other. But here, in this void that seemed to have no rules at all, everything was possible beyond the firmament. This was an ocean of light. There were countless rays of light in this place. Once they fused together, they turned into an ocean, and the balls of air were the invincible power that stirred up the ocean of light. They swept up everything in this place, filling the world with destruction. Su Ming coughed up blood. Pain, as if he was being torn apart, shot through his body. Several days had passed since he had been swept into the ocean of light in this strange world. A few days ago, in order to avoid the destructive power of the self-destruction of the seven-star ancient god, he had blasted open a crack in the void and stepped into it. This had indeed allowed him to avoid the destructive attack. However, at the same time, he had felt another kind of destruction in the void and beyond the sky. In fact, when Su Ming stepped into space, he had a strange feeling. It was as if the universe in space was a shell, a gigantic shell, and the area beyond the universe under space was the area beyond the shell. If anyone looked at it that way, then they could treat the entire universe of arid triad expanse cosmos as a gigantic egg, and the place where Su Ming was at that moment was the area beyond the eggshell. Endless light formed an ocean, and endless air formed wind that could not be sensed. It swept up the ocean of light and turned it into a dazzling light that could destroy everything in the world. There was an endless amount of light in this place. In fact, Su Ming could even see the light of extreme darkness among them. His physical body had long since been torn apart and no longer existed. At that moment, what was swept up in the ocean of light were his nascent divinity and his right hand. His right hand might be a physical body, but it had not been torn apart in this place. In fact, Su Ming could even see a door exuding thick aura of abyss in his nascent divinity, along with a fragment that had mostly recovered. Countless runic symbols shone on the fragment. It was the seed of life extermination. The third update is here. I have completed the 2 eruptions this week. Please vote. I will fulfill my promise with my actions. Please vote. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 12:30. As the ocean of light surged forward, Su Ming's physical body was torn apart, and only his right hand was still in intense pain. He was continuously swept back and forth in the boundless universe under space and above the universe. The tearing of his physical body and the destruction of his nascent divinity brought Su Ming an intense pain that was almost numb. If it was not because the abyss gate in his body was continuously releasing the aura of abyss and allowing his nascent divinity to swiftly recover under its nourishment, his body and soul would have been destroyed a long time ago. It was quiet around him. The ocean of light surged forward without a single sound. There was only light in this place, endless light. In the silence, Su Ming sensed the abyss gate in his body and the seed of life extermination. He could only use this method to divert his attention, because there were strong and weak lights in the area, but even the weakest light caused his nascent divinity to feel sharp pain. Fortunately, this pain did not come occasionally, but constantly, causing Su Ming to become numb to it. Since he was already in extreme pain, there was no comparison, and he forgot what it felt like to not be in pain. However, Su Ming did not give up. He continued to maintain a clear mind, because he believed that the bald crane would come to save him. He believed in this. And he also knew that the bald crane's origins were unfathomable. It could move through space to come to him. This was the only method Su Ming could use when he faced the attack from the ancient god with 7 stars. No matter how strong his physical body was, he could not fight against the power of self-destruction that came from the ancient god with 7 stars. Once all 7 of his stars were destroyed, his body, life, brand, and even his soul would explode. Perhaps the 5th kiln could do it, but summoning it required time, and the ancient god's self-destruction had been incredibly sudden. It happened so suddenly that Su Ming did not have much time to prepare himself. In fact, due to the ancient god's self-destruction being too great, even the power to reverse time could not be reversed at that moment. Su Ming might not have executed it in detail, but at that instant, he had already come to a clear understanding of it. He could either have his body and soul destroyed in the self-destruction or break through space and step into the dangerous universe. Su Ming chose the latter. At that moment, he floated in the ocean of light and was swept up by the waves formed by light. He did not know how much time had passed or how far he had traveled. To keep his mind clear and not fall unconscious due to the intense pain, he placed all his attention on the abyss gate and the seed of life extermination, because besides these 2 objects, there was nothing else he could pay attention to. This was not the first time he observed the seed of life extermination, but it was definitely the first time Su Ming observed it so attentively that he could sense it in such an environment. He noticed that the fragment Xiao Hong had given him in the past had fused with Su Ming's nascent divinity many years ago, causing them to become one. At that moment, due to the nourishment from Su Ming's soul and everything Su Ming had experienced, the edges of the seed of life extermination had gradually regrown. It looked like a statue, and now the statue was almost half complete. Just a little bit more, and it would become half a statue. It could be vaguely seen from the statue that it was an ancient ship. However, for some unknown reason, as Su Ming continued observing it, he suddenly had a strange feeling. It came from the seed of life extermination's recovery speed. It seemed to have become much slower compared to the first time Su Ming saw it. Su Ming would often pay attention to the seed of life extermination, but at that moment, as this feeling rose in his heart, he gradually felt that the seed of life extermination could not reach true completion. It was as if, based on its recovery speed, when half of the seed of life extermination was complete, it would no longer grow. It was as if, even if it had already fused perfectly with Su Ming's nascent divinity, it would still reach its limit when it reached half of the seed of life extermination. This was the first time Su Ming had this guess appear at the back of his head. In silence, he sank into deep thought. Could it be that the seed of life extermination still lacks something for its growth? Su Ming could not think of an answer. As he mulled over his thoughts, he immediately cast all his attention on the seed of life extermination again. He watched it exist in his nascent divinity like a parasite. In fact, as Su Ming focused his attention on it, he suddenly saw threads of Venus pathways extending from the seed of life extermination to his nascent divinity. The Venus pathways only lasted for an instant before they disappeared, but the scene that had suddenly appeared caused Su Ming's heart to tremble. It was the first time he saw such a strange sight. The web-like Venus pathways that stretched out from the seed of life extermination might have only appeared for an instant, but it caused Su Ming's skin to crawl. His first thought was that it was a spider. The seed of life extermination was like a spider. It had formed countless Venus pathways that stretched out from Su Ming's nascent divinity to form a huge web. At that moment, Su Ming had completely ignored the intense pain of his nascent divinity being continuously torn apart. He also ignored the feeling of the abyss gate continuously healing his nascent divinity. All his attention was placed on the seed of life extermination. Something's wrong. But this time, no matter how Su Ming observed it, he could no longer see the Venus pathways. It was as if everything that had happened before was just an illusion. However, Su Ming was certain that even if he was suffering from intense pain at that moment, the scene before was definitely not an illusion. After all, he was the progenitor who controlled illusions, and he had the confidence to do so. Then just what is the reason why I could see it before, but not after? Su Ming's eyes sparkled rapidly. Suddenly, his gaze focused, and he slowly turned his head around to look at the colorful lights around him. As all sorts of colors intersected with each other and fused together, they formed an innumerable amount of different lights. It's light. That's right, it's the light here. When a certain kind of light shines on my nascent divinity, it can reveal a scene that I usually can't see. As Su Ming's heart trembled, he immediately recalled what sort of light had appeared around him when the Venus pathways appeared. However, this was clearly an incredibly difficult task. The light in this place was constantly present, and it was impossible for him to find out what sort of light had appeared at a certain point in time. In silence, resolve appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He had to understand just what was going on with the seed of life extermination, because there was a high possibility that it was a secret he would never be able to discover in his entire life. If he had not stepped into this place by chance, it would have been impossible for him to know that the seed of life extermination had clearly fused with his nascent divinity. But what Su Ming saw previously had caused his skin to crawl. A light shone in Su Ming's eyes, and his nascent divinity moved from the still ocean of light. With it, the feeling of his nascent divinity being torn became several times stronger, causing Su Ming's nascent divinity to shudder. If it was not because of the large amount of aura of abyss spreading out from the abyss gate, he would have been torn to shreds. Yet even so, it did not make Su Ming get rid of his thoughts. His nascent divinity instantly swam about in the ocean of light while enduring the intense pain and the urge to throw his head back and roar to vent his pain, because he had to place all his attention on the seed of life extermination. If he vented his pain, his will would become lax, and he would not be able to pay attention to the seed of life extermination. Su Ming's nascent divinity continued swimming about, trying to make all sorts of light shine on his nascent divinity. Time trickled by. After the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, Su Ming's nascent divinity had become incredibly weak due to the intense pain of being torn apart. Yet at that moment, a ray of light that was a fusion of red and white suddenly flashed and swept past Su Ming's nascent divinity. At the instant it swept past him, Su Ming's nascent divinity shuddered. He saw the seed of life extermination in his nascent divinity again. With the seed of life extermination as the center, it spread through all the Venus pathways in Su Ming's nascent divinity. At the same time, Su Ming's nascent divinity continued moving as if it was chasing after the red and white light, causing the Venus pathways from the seed of life extermination in his nascent divinity to remain clear. Gradually, a brilliant light shone in Su Ming's eyes. He saw that the Venus pathways were black, and the seed of life extermination did not fuse with his nascent divinity as he had previously thought. That was parasitism. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He was an abyss builder, and his understanding towards possession and parasitism was much greater than that of other people. With just one glance, he could tell that the seed of life extermination and his nascent divinity had a parasitic relationship. In silence, Su Ming sank into pensive silence. It was not that he could not accept the parasitic relationship, but it was slightly different from what he had previously thought. In silence, a crack suddenly opened at the center of his nascent divinity's brows. His third eye swiftly appeared, and when he looked at the Venus pathways, they were instantly magnified endlessly in Su Ming's eyes. When they were magnified by an unknown number of times, what Su Ming saw caused a hint of ferociousness and disbelief to appear on his face. He saw countless threads that looked like centipedes appearing on each of the Venus pathways once they were magnified by several times. Those threads fused into his nascent divinity and were continuously destroying it. Once they crushed it, they began devouring it in a frenzy. The seed of life extermination might have been able to heal and grow because it had devoured the blood of those from Saint Defire's camp. But the greater reason was that Su Ming's nascent divinity had provided a large amount of nourishment to the seed of life extermination. The destruction of a nascent divinity could not be seen with the naked eye. It cannot be sensed by divine sense either, but the damage it caused was constant. In fact, once Su Ming saw it, he could immediately tell with his level of cultivation that if he continued devouring it for another 500 years, then even if his level of cultivation increased, his nascent divinity would be irreversibly damaged. In fact, if another 500 years or even 1,000 years passed, no matter what level of cultivation Su Ming had, he would not be able to prevent his nascent divinity from dying. This was because it was a parasitic parasite that did not receive any feedback from his nascent divinity. It was a one-sided devouring, which was why Su Ming felt that it had saved him every single time. But in truth, it was the parasite's way of protecting its host. It had yet to grow, which was why it had to protect its host's life. Anguish appeared on Su Ming's face. He no longer chased after the red and white light. The venous pathways of the seed of life extermination in his nascent divinity soon disappeared, and everything returned to normal. If he had not gone through this experience, perhaps Su Ming would only know that the thing that had taken away his nascent divinity and destroyed him was the seed of life extermination. Seeking recommendation tickets to be continued. If you like this work, please come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1231. Perhaps this is something he doesn't know either, Su Ming mumbled. Perhaps this is just my misunderstanding. This is just my opinion. In truth, the seed of life extermination will be like this as it grows, and once it becomes complete, everything will change. That must be it. Su Ming fell silent. He forced down the anguish and puzzlement in his heart. In silence, the intense pain from his nascent divinity continued assaulting him. Su Ming was forced to focus his attention on his nascent divinity again. This time, he did not look at the seed of life extermination. Perhaps he had intentionally ignored it, or perhaps he did not want to think about this problem at a deeper level. He chose to observe the abyss gate. The abyss gate that had devoured a large amount of his life force. Countless cultivators and planets had become the nourishment that allowed Su Ming's nascent divinity to be indestructible in the world in the ocean of light. He stared at the abyss gate, at the gate formed by crystals. It gave off a feeling that it was incredibly fragile, as if it could be crushed with the slightest pinch. It was as if there was a difference between heaven and earth between the doors of the poor in the mortal world and those with illustrious statuses and the power of the royal family. It was not a difference in growth, but a difference in their foundations. Su Ming stared at his rather shabby abyss gate and stared at it quietly. When time passed, Su Ming averted his gaze and looked at the ocean of light around him. He could not move his body, because if he did, the pain would be several thousand times stronger than before, because he could already tell that the aura of abyss spreading out from his abyss gate was gradually diminishing. Once the aura of abyss no longer spread out, his nascent divinity would not be able to continue healing itself, and what awaited him would be his nascent divinity instantly shattering. And if he moved his nascent divinity, it would speed up the release of the aura of abyss, which would speed up the process of his nascent divinity shattering. Perhaps I will truly have to stay here for all eternity. Bald crane, you're too late. Su Ming believed that the bald crane would come, but perhaps it would head in another direction in the vast ocean of light. At that moment, Su Ming was not afraid of death. He only felt slight regret. He regretted that he had not managed to save Yu Xian, that he had not found his senior brothers, and that he could not fulfill his wish of having a home. These regrets turned into a sigh from Su Ming. He lay in the ocean of light and ignored the aura of abyss spreading out from his body. He also ignored the impression of death, because he suddenly realized that the light in this place was actually very beautiful. This beautiful light was something that could not be seen in the sky. Only in this place could one see this indescribable light. He ignored the afterlife and focused all his attention on the light here. He appreciated the beauty of the last moment he could see in his life before his primordial spirit disappeared. As he watched, Su Ming forgot about his current condition. He seemed to have become a part of the endless light, as if he had fused with them and was swimming freely in the world. The light I can see and the wind I can feel form the ocean, Su Ming mumbled. His concentration caused him to sink into a strange state at the moment when he ignored his life and death. In this strange state, Su Ming felt as if he had returned to the land of berserkers all those years ago. He had gained an epiphany while he was clearing his mind on the ninth summit. During that epiphany, he had understood how to clear his mind with pictures, as well as the change of heart. This time, as he looked at the light, he sank into the same state of epiphany. However, this time, he was not thinking about the change of heart, but the magnificence and beauty of the ocean of light. Perhaps only when a person was about to die and had completely forgotten about the shadow of death would he be able to wholeheartedly see the beauty of the light. Perhaps it was because Su Ming knew that he would not be able to look at it for much longer, which was why he treasured even the slightest bit of time. Time trickled by. As the ocean of light tumbled about, Su Ming was swept further and further away. He saw more light, and there was no end to it. It was as if his body had already been surrounded by light. He did not notice that the aura of abyss spreading out from the abyss gate in his body had become increasingly sparse. It was as if before long, there would no longer be any aura of abyss left to nourish it. His nascent divinity was being torn apart even more severely as the ocean of light tumbled about. What a strange light. Once it fused with the wind, it turned into an ocean. It actually has a power that can crush everything. As Su Ming mumbled, he saw a hint of black flash in the endless light. He was familiar with that light. It was the light of extreme darkness. Then, how was light created? Su Ming, who had forgotten about his nascent divinity, was immersed in that strange state. He stared at the endless light around him, and this question formed in his head. He wanted to know the answer. He wanted to know how light appeared, why there was such endless light in this place, why it formed an ocean, and why it possessed such a shocking power that could destroy everything. Before he came into contact with the light of extreme darkness, Su Ming did not believe that light was a form of power. It was something that could be seen and could not be lacking in the area. However, the appearance of the light of extreme darkness in Morning Dao Sect's trial grounds overturned Su Ming's thoughts. He gradually accepted the idea that light was a form of power. At that moment, when Su Ming ignored his life and death and was in a strange state, he had a feeling as if he had turned into light. The black light of extreme darkness, shining among the countless rays of light, seemed to have taken away the will that remained in his nascent divinity, causing Su Ming to feel as if he had become a part of the light beyond the universe. He seemed to have turned into the light of extreme darkness and swam about in all sorts of light. As he thought about it, the light seemed to be continuously magnified in his eyes. With his third eye at its peak, once it magnified an unknown number of times, what he saw was no longer light. Instead, he saw a vast expanse of space. There were two huge runic symbols there. They were not drawn by man, but seemed to have been born on their own in the universe. They looked like runic symbols, but they were not. They were so complicated that they were definitely not something a cultivator could create or copy. Su Ming saw the two runic symbols crash into each other and immediately fused together. The fusion was incredibly perfect, and during the process, Su Ming saw the complexity of the runic symbol rise swiftly. It was as if the runic symbol Su Ming had seen previously was a brand of the lowest level, and as they fused together, the runic symbol was swiftly climbing to a higher level. As the runic symbol evolved from the lowest to the highest, wisps of power that Su Ming could not see but could sense, which terrified him, rushed out from the air and fused into the runic symbol, as if they had turned into the nourishment it needed in the process of changing from the lowest to the highest. When the runic symbol's evolution reached its peak and it absorbed an almost endless amount of power from the area, Su Ming suddenly saw the indescribably complicated runic symbol suddenly reverse. It was no longer evolving, but was swiftly changing from a higher level to a lower one. No power from space fused into the runic symbol. Instead, when the runic symbol changed from a higher level to a lower level, an indescribably terrifying power was released from within it. As it was released, light appeared. When Su Ming saw this, his heart trembled violently. He had a vague feeling that he had come to understand something, but the simplicity that existed in the complexity of the runic symbol caused Su Ming's epiphany to be lacking something. He lacked a point that could connect him to it. Breathing. It's breathing. Su Ming's will trembled. During that instant, he found that point breathing. To Su Ming, this scene was the same as him breathing. He first needed to suck in a breath. This action was the runic symbol absorbing a large amount of the power of space around it when it evolved from a lower level to a higher level. When it reached its peak, exhaling was the same as releasing the power of space it had absorbed, and then it would turn into light. At the instant Su Ming understood this, a bang instantly rang out in his head. At the same time, since the Abyss Gate no longer released the aura of Abyss, his nascent divinity was immediately torn apart in the ocean of light. Yet at the instant his nascent divinity was torn apart, Su Ming closed his eyes and sucked in a deep breath. The light in this place caused his nascent divinity to freeze for a moment. At the instant Su Ming exhaled, his nascent divinity swiftly recovered, and a powerful ray of light spread out from within it. Su Ming's nascent divinity trembled. His eyes flew open, and understanding appeared in them. There's no wind here. Light can form an ocean because it is a form of power, and it can turn into waves of light because this power can be released. When it releases light, it also releases a power that can destroy everything. Light. This is light. Su Ming's nascent divinity shone with a light that reached 100,000 feet. As it moved in the ocean of light, it completely fused together with the light in the world. A brilliant light shone in his eyes. He sucked in a deep breath again, and immediately, booming sounds came from within his nascent divinity. Two vortexes appeared, and within them were the complicated runic symbols Su Ming had seen before. As he sucked in a breath, the two runic symbols fused together in his body. Immediately, a large amount of the power of space seemed to turn into the aura Su Ming sucked in, causing the fused runic symbol in his body to complete its leap from a lower level to a higher level. Then, as it reversed, it released a powerful light. Su Ming's breathing became increasingly rapid. As the runic symbol continued leaping and reversing, the light it released became stronger. It spread to 1,000 feet, 10,000 feet, 100,000 feet. In just a short dozen-something breaths, Su Ming threw his head back and roared. The light from his body had already spread to hundreds of thousands of feet in every direction. At that moment, Su Ming was the ocean of light. The light he released had already become an ocean. All the light in it was chased away, and only Su Ming's light remained. It was the light of extreme darkness. After this art is Mountain Shifter, it will be Ocean Remover. At the instant Su Ming's voice echoed in the air, he leaped up. From the distance, he looked like an ocean of light rising into the sky. His presence was great, and it shook the entire area. Once he rose into the sky with the ocean of light, Su Ming pushed down fiercely. The air roared, and a loud bang that broke the silence in the world of the ocean of light, a rare sight. Please give me recommendation votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Starting Point and give me recommendation votes or monthly votes. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1232. The Light of Extreme Darkness. Right now, I am the light of extreme darkness. I wonder if I have perfected the light of extreme darkness. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. His body turned into an endless ray of light that turned into a sea of light. When it roared in all directions, it disappeared, and all the light of extreme darkness in the area shrank to form a figure. His black hair floated in the air, and his black robes shone brightly. A profound, dark light shone in his black eyes. Naturally, he was Su Ming. Su Ming stood on the sea of light. At that moment, he was a part of it, and he no longer felt as if he was being torn apart. Instead, he had a power that could shake the world with just a flip of his hand. I haven't perfected it, or else, since birds of a feather flock together, all the light of extreme darkness born in the sea of light would come to me. The light of extreme darkness. The word extreme shows just how domineering it is. If I master it, I will be the only light of extreme darkness in the world. Su Ming's eyes sparkled. After a moment, determination appeared in them. He closed his eyes again, and when he spread his arms wide, the two runic symbols in his body fused and released them again. The black light of extreme darkness instantly erupted from his body. This time, Su Ming did not intentionally stop. He did not think about his limits. He wanted to release all the light of extreme darkness he could produce, and he wanted to release it to its limit. When this thought appeared, it seemed to form a strange urge and synchronize with Su Ming's light of extreme darkness. Immediately, the light of extreme darkness spreading out from Su Ming's body erupted and spread out at an indescribable speed. 10,000 feet, 100,000 feet, 300,000 feet, 100,000 something feet, and even hundreds of thousands of feet. If anyone looked over, they would find that all the light in the spot where Su Ming was had been chased away. Only a ball of extreme darkness was left. The light had already spread to this extent, but Su Ming did not intend to stop. He could sense that he had not reached his limit. He could sense that his will had not been fulfilled. His will was very simple. The world could have countless different types of light, but since he had chosen to become the light of extreme darkness, then he would be the only light of extreme darkness in the world. The only light. The light spreading out from Su Ming's body was still spreading in all directions. In the blink of an eye, it reached nearly 10 million feet from its previous height of several hundreds of thousands of feet. In fact, as time passed, the light surpassed 10 million feet. As it spread out endlessly, Su Ming finally sensed that his body had reached its limit. But he did not give up because he still did not feel that he could claim to be the one and only extreme darkness. That was why, even though he had reached his limit, he was still madly absorbing and releasing the two runes in his body. When Su Ming did not even know how far his light of extreme darkness had spread, a loud bang suddenly came from his body. At the instant it reverberated in the air. It was as if the light of extreme darkness spreading out from Su Ming had reached a certain limit and broken some sort of seal. At the instant it rumbled, Su Ming's heart trembled. The light of extreme darkness he exuded seemed to have become slightly different from before, but Su Ming could not tell just what was different. The only thing he could see was that the two runic symbols in his body had fused together and become even more complicated. In fact, when Su Ming sensed it, he had a strong feeling that it was different. It was as if they had truly fused together. It was no longer like before, when they had fused together to absorb light, and when they split apart to release light. It was as if they would never separate from each other again. At the same time, Su Ming also sensed that he no longer needed to control anything or release anything. The light of extreme darkness that appeared with his body as the center seemed to have turned into an eternal existence. Light of extreme darkness. Su Ming came to a swift realization. At that moment, he was no longer just a light of extreme darkness that could only be formed by continuously releasing light. He had become a source of light that could constantly spread out the light of extreme darkness. Soon after, at the instant he became a source of light, Su Ming sensed that there were four sources of the light of extreme darkness that were exactly the same as one of them in the boundless ocean of light. They were four ancient sources of light, and they had clearly existed for an unknown number of years. They were formed naturally after the scattered light of extreme darkness gathered together in the endless ocean of light. An ancient feeling rose in Su Ming's heart at that moment. He sensed the four sources of light in the distance, and a brilliant light shone in his eyes. Since he had become the light of extreme darkness, he would become the only light of extreme darkness in the world. This thought came from Su Ming's personality. As his eyes sparkled, he immediately moved, sweeping up the ocean formed by the light of extreme darkness that was millions of feet in size. With a loud bang, he charged towards the source of the light of extreme darkness that was closest to him. The feeling of devouring Ikang's clones rose in Su Ming's mind once more. However, this time, he did not want to devour the sentient Ikang, but the light of extreme darkness that was born in the world. He wanted to devour the other sources of the light of extreme darkness so that he would become the only source of light in the world. This was Su Ming's personality, and it was also an invisible law in the world. No one could set this law, and no living being had the right to set it. It was a natural instinct. It was just like at that moment. Endless rays of light shone brilliantly in the ocean of light, but they did not have sentience. This meant that once one of them gained sentience, the other rays of light of the same kind would have to fuse with each other. Sentience fusing with non-sentience was a part of the invisible law in the universe. It could not be changed, and no one would be willing to change it. Time trickled by. With the speed at which Su Ming turned into the origin of the light of extreme darkness, he saw a vast black ocean in the ocean of light several days later. It was an ocean of black light, and it was an origin of the light of extreme darkness that was the exact same as him. The moment Su Ming saw it, he started devouring it. The black light of extreme darkness fused with each other without any form of resistance. In just the span of a few breaths, Su Ming let out a long roar. At the instant it echoed in the ocean of light, the two balls of light fused together, and a gigantic ball of light that shone with a light that could cover 100 million feet appeared in the ocean of light. When the gigantic origin of the light of extreme darkness appeared and Su Ming's long roar echoed in the air, his heart trembled again. He felt as if he had broken some sort of seal. At the instant that feeling rose in his heart, the other three balls of the light of extreme darkness that he had sensed from the distance crumbled at the same time and turned into endless rays of light of extreme darkness that charged towards Su Ming from all directions at an incredible speed. As they approached him, it was as if Su Ming had become the progenitor of the light of extreme darkness. All the lights of extreme darkness born in the ocean of light longed to fuse with him. Over the course of several days, rays of light of extreme darkness continuously charged towards him, and the source of light that was Su Ming continued growing from its previous size of 100 million feet. With each ray of light of extreme darkness he fused with, the source of light that was Su Ming would become slightly larger. When he fused with all the lights of extreme darkness in his senses, a loud bang rang out in his heart, and the ocean of light within a circular area of 300 million feet turned black. But it was also at that moment that 6 vast sources of light appeared in Su Ming's senses. Each of them was larger than Su Ming, and they were so far away that even if Su Ming charged forward at full speed as the light of extreme darkness, he would still need hundreds of years to reach them. The ocean of light was too big, and there was no end to it. In fact, Su Ming had a strong feeling that even if he had fused with the 6 sources of light, he could still sense that there was an even greater light of extreme darkness in the boundless ocean of light. Cultivating light is the same as cultivating Tao. Light has no end, and Tao is boundless, Su Ming mumbled. He seemed to have come to understand something from the light of extreme darkness, but when he thought about it carefully, he found that he did not understand anything. In silence, Su Ming gave up on continuing fusing with the other lights of extreme darkness. It was not that he could not do it, but that he would need too much time, and at that moment, time was very precious to Su Ming. It's time for me to leave, but before I leave, I need another type of light. All the light of extreme darkness around Su Ming disappeared and turned into a black Su Ming. He stood in the ocean of light as if he had become the master of the area. As he mumbled under his breath, he took a step forward. He walked through all sorts of colorful lights until he found what he wanted in one of the ocean of light, red and white. It was the light that allowed him to see the life, extermination, Venus pathways in his nascent divinity. With a swing of his arm, Su Ming put a wisp of it into his body and stored it in his nascent divinity. Just as he was about to leave the ocean of light, his expression suddenly changed. Once he turned into the light of extreme darkness, the ocean of light that spanned 300 million feet appeared in his mind. In the distance, he saw the bald crane carefully swimming about in the ocean of light. Occasionally, it would scream, and at other times, it would curse. The damage caused by the light seemed to vary in strength, but the bald crane was avoiding the damage while moving forward in the ocean of light. At the same time, Su Ming also saw an existence that was clearly a soul thread in another direction. It was attached to a ray of light and moved with it. As it struggled, it nearly disappeared. After a moment of pensive silence, Su Ming lifted his foot and took a step forward. He disappeared, and when he reappeared, he was right in front of the bald crane. Almost at the instant Su Ming appeared, the bald crane screamed. "Darn it all, just what kind of luck do I have? THTH this. There's actually a source of light here. I'm doomed. I'm doomed. Su Ming, you bastard. It's not that I don't want to save you, but I can't even protect myself." As the bald crane screamed, it retreated swiftly with terror on its face. It was no wonder why the bald crane could not help but attack Su Ming, because in its eyes, it did not see Su Ming, but a figure shrouded in the light of extreme darkness. The light of extreme darkness blocked off all auras from leaking out, and all the other rays of light around Su Ming avoided him, not daring to get close to him. To the bald crane, this was clearly a source of light. Su Ming smiled faintly, but the bald crane could not see it. He swung his arm, and a ball of light of extreme darkness immediately enveloped the bald crane. Su Ming moved, and with the bald crane, he shot through space to head towards the place where he had sensed the soul thread previously. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Achidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1233. Grandpa Light of Light, please spare me. Just pretend that I, your grandson, am nothing. Let me go. It's a pity that I have to take care of my parents and children. Why you? Damn it. You're a light of light that has no consciousness. It's useless even if you beg for mercy. As the bald crane screamed, its body shuddered. It was enveloped by a large ball of the light of extreme darkness, and as Su Ming moved forward, its voice continued traveling outwards. Damn it! Why is there a light of light here? I was already very careful to avoid it. I noticed that the closest light of light was very far away. There was no light of light in the area where I was just now. Little boy Su, you've really caused my death. Farewell, my crystals. It's a pity that I haven't gathered enough. I only have a small amount. It's a pity that my great wish of being able to buy an entire true world hasn't been fulfilled yet. As the bald crane wailed, Su Ming had already brought it to the spot where the soul thread was. With just one glance, he saw that the soul thread was attached to a wisp of milky white light. That light was rather strange. It was not harmful and could instead nourish the nascent divinity, which was why the soul thread was only about to dissipate, or else it would have crumbled a long time ago. Clearly, the soul thread recognized the milky white light, which was why it had thought of this method. As he stared at the soul thread, a hint of surprise appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He lifted his right hand and tapped the milky white light slightly. Immediately, a memory rose in his heart. It was the memory of the milky white light, and in it, Su Ming saw that the soul thread had appeared a month ago. It had arrived at the exact same time as Su Ming. What are you doing, light of light? You actually know how to lift your hand? Ah, I remember now. You can actually move on your own. You intentionally appeared in front of me just now. That's impossible. Light of light doesn't have consciousness, so how could it move? The bald crane stared at Su Ming, who was enveloped by the light of extreme darkness, in slight disbelief. Su Ming flicked his right hand, and the milky white light immediately distorted, causing the soul thread to bounce off. Then Su Ming grabbed it. You, you, you actually know how to do this. You have consciousness. Heavens, you have consciousness. The bald crane shouted loudly, and its voice did not stop. Su Ming held the soul thread in his right hand and swung his left hand. Immediately, a crystal appeared with a whoosh and flew towards the bald crane. The bald crane almost instinctively grabbed it and placed it in its mouth to take a huge bite. Once it did so, it instantly beamed with joy. In fact, it did not matter whether it was its bald tail but all of them swayed a few times. Su Ming pinched the soul thread. It struggled weakly in his hand, but under the light of extreme darkness, its struggles were powerless. Su Ming's divine sense that contained the light of extreme darkness fused into the soul thread, and when it could no longer fight back, it charged into its soul. During that instant, Su Ming saw the soul strand's memories, and a few pictures immediately appeared in his head. The first scene was that of an unfamiliar sky. A black-robed man strode down from a tall mountain peak, then dropped down. As soon as he touched the ground, he vanished without a trace. The second scene was also that of the black-robed man standing beyond a huge pillar of light. Beside him was Bai Ling, who made Su Ming's heart clench in pain. There was also an old man whom Su Ming immediately recognized as Di Tian with just one glance. In fact, Su Ming had heard most of their conversation. The third scene was that of the black-robed man sitting in the pillar of light and executing the plan to replace the ancient god. Under his control, the ancient god self-destructed. The scenes disappeared, and the soul thread completely shattered in Su Ming's palm. The plan to replace the ancient god. This soul thread was prepared for possession. If I hadn't stepped into the world beyond the universe, then once the ancient god self-destructed, it would have crawled into my body and possessed me. A hint of derision appeared in Su Ming's eyes. By the looks of it, the three hidden dynasts, Dao Hua and Dao Lin, have all been successfully possessed and have become members of the Immortals Union. This soul thread is a portion of the black-robed man's soul. With just a portion of his soul, he managed to do this. It's a telling sign that his level of cultivation is incredibly great. Sublime Paragon Di Tian. So what he wants to do in my physical body is a life change art. He wants to use my real physical body to change everything about himself with the help of Saint Defire's camp, so that he can become an abyss builder. A freezing glare shone in Su Ming's eyes. 3 months, huh? I've already been here for more than a month. I should still be able to make it in time. Su Ming closed his eyes, and a myriad of thoughts raced in his head. This was a chance to seize back his real physical body. As Su Ming thought about it, the bald crane had already put away the crystals. It stared at Su Ming, who was enveloped in black light, and felt slightly anxious. At that moment, it let out a fake cough, and an obsequious expression appeared on its face. As the only sentient Lord Origin of light in the world and the Sea of Light, don't you think that you need a great bald crane who is as handsome, knowledgeable, efficient, never drags his feet when doing things, smart, wise, kind, and has a great heart like me? Let me be your follower. As the bald crane spoke nervously, Su Ming opened his eyes. With a smile that the bald crane could not see, he sized up the bald crane. Kind? Su Ming asked slowly. His voice traveled through the light of extreme darkness, and when the bald crane heard it, it felt as if there was a cold and sinister air to it. It shuddered, but its spirits lifted. That's right. I'm a kind person. When I see someone in need, I will go up and touch them. When I see someone die, I will cry and help bury them. When I see a child, I will be happy. The bald crane quickly said. You will touch a storage bag to see how many crystals are in it. You will search for crystals from a corpse because you think that children are easier to deceive and that you can trick them into giving you crystals, Su Ming said faintly. His words instantly stunned the bald crane. Do we know each other? Why you? Could it be that you are? Su Ming smiled. The light of extreme darkness around him disappeared to reveal his nascent divinity. He looked at the bald crane with a smile. The bald crane covered its chest and screamed in pain. It took a few steps back, and anger appeared on its face. It lifted its bald claw and pointed at Su Ming. Extreme sadness appeared on its face. Su Ming, I worked so hard in vain. I risked my life and was even prepared to die. I sacrificed a large number of crystals and spent hundreds of thousands, no, millions of years of my life to come here to find you. Why you? How could you? I'm so sad. I was deceived. Darn it all, I was bullied. The bald crane wailed and blinked rapidly before falling to the ground and rolling about. Su Ming lifted his right hand, and a crystal flew up with a slap to the bald crane. Once the bald crane caught it, it instantly beamed with joy, but it immediately suppressed it and started screaming. You want to make up for it with just one crystal? This is an insult to me. The bald crane will definitely not bend my back for just one crystal. With a slap, another crystal fell. The bald crane stared at the crystal falling in front of it with a dumbfounded expression, and a smile appeared on its face again. This time, no matter how it tried to suppress its excitement, it could not help but reveal its excitement. Especially with a slap, the third crystal fell, then the fourth. When the fifth crystal fell, the bald crane immediately stopped rolling about. It grabbed all the crystals and let out a fake cough. Yes, I forgive. With a slap, the sixth crystal fell. You didn't do anything wrong. Darn all, Mr. Su, what you did previously was absolutely right. With a slap, the seventh crystal fell. One more time. Should we do what we did just now again? The bald crane was so excited that its entire body trembled, and it made the suggestion that made it happy just thinking about it. Su Ming stared at the bald crane, and a smile appeared on his face. He had long since treated the bald crane as a friend, but he could not let this friend of his be too arrogant, or else the scene from Blacking Planet would constantly repeat itself. All right, it's time for us to leave. We have more important things to do. Su Ming lifted his head and stared at the endless ocean of light. A dark light shone in his eyes, and with a swing of his arm, he swept up the bald crane and charged into the distance. Several days later, in the territory of the Immortals Union in true Morning Dao world was an empty planet near the core of the Immortals territory. Distortions appeared in space, and when the distortions disappeared, a ball of black light shone. When Su Ming and the bald crane walked out of it, the light dissipated to reveal Su Ming, who was dressed in a black robe, had a head full of black hair, and had a profound gaze. He stood in the galaxy, looking as if he had been reborn from the ashes. His presence was still that of those in Mastery Realm, but he, who had turned into the origin of the light of extreme darkness and created the ocean remover art, had become several times stronger than before. Nothing in space or beyond the universe can stop me from returning to this place. I have returned, Su Ming mumbled. At that moment, he no longer looked like Dao Kong, but had turned into an unfamiliar face. That unfamiliar face had been created by Su Ming, because at that moment, he did not have a physical body, but a nascent divinity. However, even if it was just a nascent divinity, he could still erupt with a shocking power. Do you want to snatch back your real, physical body in the Immortals Union? Darn it all, let's go. You snatch back your physical body, and I'll go gather crystals, the bald crane said excitedly. The bald crane spoke excitedly by the side. In the midst of its excitement, it started shuddering, and its arrogant cries echoed in the air. If I enter the Immortals Union from here, with my current level of cultivation, the possibility of me seizing back my physical body isn't high, Su Ming said faintly. Then what should we do? The bald crane was stunned. Have the people from the Immortals Union and the people from Saint Defire suppress us, or have D-Tion personally bring us in? A malicious smile appeared on Su Ming's face. The bald crane sized up Su Ming in surprise, then began to grumble in its heart. Could it be that Su Ming has become an idiot after he became the origin of the light of extreme darkness? It suddenly became slightly worried about what would happen to the idiotic Su Ming in the future. While the bald crane was worried, dark light shone in Su Ming's eyes. The light of extreme darkness gradually appeared on his body. It grew stronger, and in an instant, it covered the entire galaxy, filling it with the light of extreme darkness. The light of extreme darkness is a powerful power of light. Anyone who sees it will be tempted. Please give me monthly votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to give me recommendation votes and monthly votes. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1234. Even if they saw me execute the light of extreme darkness before, so what? They won't think that I will become the origin of the light of extreme darkness. Even if the origin of the light of extreme darkness appeared a little too suddenly, so what? Unless they aren't tempted by it, or else. A distortion that lasted for nearly 7 days appeared in the galaxy near the Immortals Union. The area of the distortion reached 300 million feet, and it attracted the attention of most cultivators in the Immortals Union. It was especially so on the 7th day. The distortions turned into a huge crack. An array of black light that looked like it could freeze the universe appeared. That light continued spreading outwards and turned into a complete origin of the light of extreme darkness. The light of extreme darkness shone non-stop within an area of 300 million feet. This scene instantly shocked the entire Immortals Union. In fact, after another 7 days, even Morning Dao sect learned of it. In fact, the war between the two sides seemed to have gradually come to a stop once the gigantic origin of the light of extreme darkness appeared. Countless gazes landed on the region belonging to the Immortals Union through the galaxy. Every single day, a large number of cultivators from the Immortals Union surrounded the area of 300 million feet to observe the light of extreme darkness that had suddenly appeared half a month ago. There was shock in their eyes, along with deep greed. They could sense a chill that could freeze hearts and souls spreading out from the light of extreme darkness. They could also sense the terrifying power contained within it. There were 24 hours in a day. Only during those 2 hours would the gigantic origin of the light of extreme darkness weaken slightly. But once those 2 hours passed, it would immediately appear at its strongest point of the day. The time of day would change every single day. There was some sort of pattern to this change, causing many people to be able to tell at first glance that this was a source of light that did not have any consciousness. It only changed based on instinct. No one knew why it had suddenly appeared in the galaxy, but it was clear that this was a supreme treasure that all cultivators would desire to obtain. If anyone could obtain it and refine it, then their divine abilities would increase by leaps and bounds. In fact, they could even become famous with the light of extreme darkness. After all, there is only one light of extreme darkness in Morning Dao sect, and it was gathered together to form a trial ground. In fact, it was said that progenitor Dao Chun had personally subdued it several tens of thousands of years ago. Right then, what had appeared in true Morning Dao world was not just one source of light, but a gigantic source of light. It was like the contrast between the bright moon and the light of a firefly. It turned into greed that grew endlessly in the hearts of all the cultivators who knew about it. After all, this was not just a single ray of the light of extreme darkness. It was a vast source of light. If a cultivator could refine it, they would be able to achieve great things. If they placed it in a race, they could make that race stronger. In fact, if they placed it in Morning Dao sect or the Immortals Union, they could refine it into an astonishing, supreme treasure. It would be of great use in any battle. The appearance of the origin of the light of extreme darkness had already attracted the attention of the powerful cultivators in the Immortals Union. However, the core members of the Immortals Union, the Phoenix sect and the Immortal sects who formed the Union, immediately sealed off the spot where the light of extreme darkness had appeared. The light of extreme darkness had basically appeared at the doorstep of the Immortal sects, which was why they were the first to notice it. In fact, most of the people who had been sent to observe it were from the Immortal sections. When the origin of the light of extreme darkness had appeared for nearly 20 days, the white-robed Baifeng stared at the light of extreme darkness in the galaxy and said coldly, "This is indeed the light of extreme darkness." By her side was Dition, who was dressed in a white robe and had a head full of white hair. He looked even older than a month ago. He stared at the light of extreme darkness, and no one could tell what he was thinking. Between them was the black-robed man from St. Defier Expanse Cosmos and one of the 8 paramount Daos. His face was hidden under the black robe, but it could not hide the strange light shining in his eyes. The origin of the light of extreme darkness is a rare item that will only appear in a growing expanse cosmos beyond the universe. It has completely disappeared from St. Defier's camp. Only a growing expanse cosmos can give birth to the light of extreme darkness. Once an expanse cosmos is completely formed, it will disappear. The boundless galaxy only has a sliver of a chance to grow into an expanse cosmos like St. Defier and Dark Dawn, which will each have 180 expanse cosmoses. Only then will such a dazzling light appear in this growing, primordial expanse cosmos. To Arid Triad, St. Defier and Dark Dawn are old men. Arid Triad is still a child. Whoever has this child will be able to suppress the other camp and become the only existence in the boundless galaxy. I didn't expect that I would see the brilliant origin of the light of extreme darkness born alongside Arid Triad after just 1,000-something years. The black-robed man's eyes sparkled, and he sighed with emotion in his heart. Have someone step into the origin of the light of extreme darkness every single moment for the next half a month and search for its origin core. Lock down the perimeter and forbid anyone from entering. Those who disobey will be killed. The black-robed man's eyes sparkled as he spoke slowly. Sublime Paragon Dition, if I can control the light of extreme darkness, even if I can't refine it within a short period of time, as long as I leave a divine brand on its origin core, I can activate it in a simple manner. I can increase the chances of your life changing art by 2/10. Dition's eyes focused swiftly. He cast a glance at the black-robed man, then lifted his right hand. A jade slip instantly appeared on his palm. When he squeezed it, it turned into 9 wisps of smoke that swiftly left into the distance. It stirred up all the immortal sects, and they executed a tight lockdown on the place. Fellow Taoists by phone, you might have your master's recommendation, but if you want to become a cultivator of St. Defier, there are still plenty of obstacles in your path. At the very least, your body won't be able to withstand the reversal return art, but if I can successfully obtain the origin of the light of extreme darkness, then your master and I will jointly recommend you. Because of that, with my status as one of the 8 paramount Daos, your chances of becoming a cultivator of St. Defier will increase by 2/10. Bai Feng's expression remained the same. In silence, she cast a cold glance at the origin of the light of extreme darkness. Senior, don't you think that the origin of the light of extreme darkness appeared too suddenly? I know that Dao Kong, who is forced beyond the universe, has control over the light of extreme darkness. It's precisely because he has control over the light of extreme darkness that the origin of the light of extreme darkness appeared in the universe. There's a connection between this matter, and it is possible that you are worried about it, fellow Taoist by phone. The black-robed man laughed. Even though he said those words, he did not think much of it. In his mind, Dao Kong only had control over the light of extreme darkness, but the one before him was the origin of the light of extreme darkness. The difference between the two was like heaven and earth. But I still need to go through the necessary tests. As the black-robed man laughed hoarsely, he moved and instantly appeared beyond the light of extreme darkness. He lifted his right hand and struck the center of his brows. A vast will immediately appeared with a bang and turned into an invisible wind that charged towards the light of extreme darkness. After a moment, the black-robed man shuddered. When he retracted his will, excitement appeared in his eyes under his robes. This is indeed the origin of the light of extreme darkness. There's no hint of consciousness in it. It's definitely not fake. As the black-robed man laughed, he took a few steps back. He did not immediately act recklessly. He knew that the light of extreme darkness contained incredibly severe damage to the nascent divinity, but it was precisely because it did not have any consciousness that there was a pattern to many of the changes. If he found a path to the core and left his brand, he could claim it as his own. Besides, when he sent his divine sense outwards just then, he had only sent it out nearly 3/10 of the way before he sensed the great power and changes in the origin of the light of extreme darkness. When the light intersected with each other and spread out, he did not dare to force his way in. In fact, he could even sense a hint of danger in it. But the more dangerous it was, the more greed the black-robed man felt. He was also anxious. He knew that in another month, Xing Ji Dao would descend. If he had not obtained the light of extreme darkness by then, there would be another person who would snatch it from him. Then I will have the cultivators from the Immortals Union continue fighting against Morning Dao sect so that they won't be able to divert their attention to plot for the origin of the light of extreme darkness in this place. As for your promise, I thank you, Senior, Bai Feng said coldly and bowed slightly towards the black-robed man. You flatter me. The black-robed man smiled before turning around and disappearing from the place. He returned to the area beyond the Pillar of Light in the Immortals' territory. When he appeared there, the smile on his face disappeared and was replaced by a stern expression. He lifted his right hand and struck the Pillar of Light. Immediately, the colors in the pillar became chaotic, and 7 distorted shadows manifested within it. 7 fingers under me. Fuse into the origin of the light of extreme darkness and investigate clearly whether it is man-made. Investigate clearly whether it truly does not have its own will. Just as the rumors say, I will give you 10 days. You must complete your task. The black-robed man said flatly. Immediately, the 7 distorted shadows in the Pillar of Light shone and turned into 7 black-robed men. Once they bowed, they disappeared together. When the Immortals Union was fully activated, a large number of cultivators would enter the light of extreme darkness to investigate. Usually, only 1 out of 10 who entered would survive, and as time passed, the number of casualties increased. Morning Dao sect also carried out a large number of investigations, but the origin of the light of extreme darkness had appeared in the core of the Immortals Union. Because of it, Morning Dao sect could not do anything about it. All of this was carried out in an orderly manner. In fact, 7 black-robed men had arrived in the light of extreme darkness without a single sound a few days ago, and they were carrying out a strict investigation. Su Ming saw everything that happened. He saw the black-robed man's divine sense coming towards him and the 7 black-robed men whose presences were clearly much weaker than the black-robed man's. They were searching through his light, and he also saw Di Tian as well as Bai Feng, who looked the exact same as Bai Ling, because he was the origin of the light of extreme darkness. No matter how others tried to investigate him, he was still the light of extreme darkness, and the only thing Su Ming needed to do was hide his will and show that he was unconscious. With the bald crane's help, everything would be much simpler. This was Su Ming's trap. He used himself as bait. He was waiting for someone to come and collect him. He was waiting for someone to personally bring him into the heavily guarded region of the Immortals. And that day was getting closer and closer. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Starting Point and cast a recommendation vote or monthly vote. Your support is my greatest motivation. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Starting Point and cast a recommendation vote or monthly vote. Your support is my greatest motivation. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.